Hello and thank you for joining us here on the National Television Network for live coverage of today's sitting of the House of Assembly. It is Tuesday, the 11th of June, 2019, and this is the fourth session of the 11th Parliament. Today we will see a motion being made by the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and Public Service, as well as the 8 bills to be voted on. But for now, we'll deal with the motion. This motion is essentially to make way for the UNR International Redevelopment Project. The motion will be laid by the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and the Public Service. States, be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance. This motion states, be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance tomorrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged to the Consolidated Fund. It also states, be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee a loan in the amount of $202,500,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited by the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority for the purpose of financing the Huronar International Airport Redevelopment Project. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable over a period of 20 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years on the principal payments with interest only paid. The interest is payable quarterly from the date of the initial disbursement of the loan amount and is payable at a rate of 5.5% per annum during the grace period of 5 years. The interest is also payable semi-annually at a rate of up to 5% per annum at the expiry of the grace period of 5 years. A commitment fee of 0.75% is payable on the disbursement of that loan. The third part of this motion is, be it resolved that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 3, order which amends Schedule 3 of the Act to exempt the import of goods or services for the Huronar International Airport Redevelopment Project for a period of 4 years and 1 month commencing from the first day of June 2018. And we see the Sergeant of Arms is entering the House, and when he places the mace, this will signal the start of this session of Parliament.
Let us pray.
In the name of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign, and princes decree justice, from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding, we thy unworthy servant, here gathered together in thy name, we beseech thee, O God, send your wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. Grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affection, the result of all our counsel may be to the glory of your name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the heart of all persons and estates within the same in true Christian love and charity towards one another through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And so, Lord, we continue as we present ourselves to you. We ask your presence, O God, to be with the speaker. Direct him, O God, even as he is directing us. Talk to him, O God, and let your presence, O God, be among us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, The love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Let me apologize to you, to the House, for my lateness in getting to the House of Assembly this morning, which also reflects on our starting of time. My apologies. Honorable members, I beg to announce that since the last sitting of the Parliament, His Excellency has been pleased to assent to the following bill: Appropriation 2019-2020. I know that the Minister for Education and member for Mako North would have loved to be here, as I extend best wishes to all students who will be writing the common entrance examinations tomorrow, Wednesday, June 12th. Let me, on a personal note, take this opportunity to wish my son, Eden Daniel, the very best in the exam also tomorrow. The Minister of Education is traveling today, and she's unable to be here with us. Honorable members, let me also inform you that St. Lucia, through myself, was invited to participate in the International Grand Committee on Big Data Privacy and Democracy in a meeting in Ottawa to question social media outlets. I was the only English-speaking Caribbean nation to represent us. I will so circulate during the course of the day an article on this matter. We have also been invited by the CPA, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, to be assessed. That means that is the Parliament of St. Lucia. In fact, let me just read the letter from the General Secretary, just the first note. I am writing to bring to your attention the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association CPA updated recommended benchmarks for democratic legislatures, and to invite your branch to participate in an exercise to assess your legislature against these new benchmarks. I will circulate the benchmarks to you, members, as well as a copy of the letter during the course of the morning. Statements by ministers. Honorable Minister for Agriculture and Honorable Member for Babonneau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a statement as it pertains to the banana industry in St. Lucia and what has transpired over the past few weeks and months. Mr. Speaker, the review of the agricultural sector is showing expanded growth. The output of most subsectors has experienced high level of production, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the negative impact of climate change. For example, Mr. Speaker, Tropical Storm Matthew in 2016, where it was estimated that 80% of our banana fields got damaged. Again, Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we had a negative impact of climate change, Irma and Maria. What we saw and what we experienced during that time, especially during the time of Maria, Mr. Speaker, was that it's estimated between 10 to 20% of our fields being damaged. However, Mr. Speaker, in the case of Roseau, that's the Roseau Valley, it was estimated to be 30 to 40%, with some farmers experiencing up to 60 to 70% loss. And again, Mr. Speaker, in 2018, we experienced Tropical Storm Kurt, which destroyed 80% of our banana fields. Despite, Mr. Speaker, all these tropical storms, St. Lucia still recorded 5.8% growth as far as banana sales to the UK, and a 7.6% in revenue for 2018. The undisputed fact, Mr. Speaker, is that banana exports in 2018, despite all the negative impact of climate change, has been the highest in 5 years. That's an undisputed fact. Mr. Speaker, the government understand and appreciating the socio-economic impact of a well-coordinated agricultural program on our rural communities has decided to undertake a focused approach in the implementation of our many agricultural programs. The Banana Production Improvement Project, BPIP, with the financial and technical assistance from the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, is one such program, Mr. Speaker. Since the establishment following the Tropical Storm Matthew in September 2016, we have experienced, and that's the fact, we have grown from 1,117 acres to 2,669 acres of banana cultivation. We have moved from 230 farmers to 643 farmers operating 764 farms, Mr. Speaker. We have moved from 195 farmers selling fruits to the UK market to 291 farmers now selling fruits to the UK market, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, presently, we have about 290 farmers waiting to be Eurogap certified. This certification, Mr. Speaker, is necessary to allow these farmers to sell fair trade bananas on the UK market. Presently, Mr. Speaker, we have a system that only allows for 10% of your certified farmers to be certified for a year, which means if we allow that system to continue, it will take us over 8 years to have all these farmers certified. So we are looking at ways and means, Mr. Speaker, to see how we can get all these farmers certified so they can sell the bananas on the UK market. Considering the positive impact of the Banana Production Improvement Program, the stakeholders are projecting a weekly export production figure of 17,000 boxes, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we can accomplish this barring any negative impact of climate change and any introduction of pests and disease that will affect our production. Notwithstanding that projection, Mr. Speaker, Windfresh informed the National Fair Trade Organization, NFTO, that they can only guarantee 6,000 boxes weekly of fair trade bananas, with over 4,000 boxes being small fingers. Mr. Speaker, this situation, if allowed to remain, is not favorable and supportive to our program. And this has caused the Honorable Prime Minister to lead a delegation, Mr. Speaker, to the UK, where we dialogue with a number of supermarkets and the French company, UGBAN, that is interested in purchasing our bananas. Mr. Speaker, UGBAN, this other meeting, expressed its interest in purchasing St. Lucia bananas and agreed to a trial shipment of 1,000 boxes for a 3-week period in the first instance. And of course, they gave a commitment to us that if this trial shipment proves successful, they will continue with 3,000 boxes weekly. These boxes are expected to contain 22 clusters, 6 fingers bag fruit. That is the requirement. 22 clusters, 6 fingers bag fruit. Whilst we were able, Mr. Speaker, to get the 1,000 boxes for our first trial shipment, because of the size of our fruits, Mr. Speaker, we were not able to get 22 clusters in the boxes that we are using in St. Lucia right now. So that is a challenge for us. In light of that experience, Mr. Speaker, we are discussing with the company, that's UGBAN, on the possibility of other options, such as less clusters in the box, or getting a more appropriate carton that will be able to accommodate the 22 clusters. And of course, to explore the option of selling loose fruits. Mr. Speaker, as it pertains to the other supermarkets, I can say that there is an interest in our bananas. But what we realize is that there seems to be more interested in short fingers and organic fair trade bananas. But it was generally accepted at these meetings that we should engage in a branding campaign of St. Lucia bananas, and some of the supermarkets have agreed to give support as it pertains to that initiative. Mr. Speaker, we also visited WinFresh facilities in the UK, and the visit discovered some challenges for us. One, we're realizing that our farmers are packing small fingers in standard boxes. We also realized that there are a number of boxes where we had uneven ripening because of different grades that were packed in the box, and of course mechanical damage. Mr. Speaker, the way forward, I think there's a need for us to continue to discuss with UGBAN, that's a French company, as to the respective options. And let me say here today, Mr. Speaker, that this government have never shipped any container of bananas to France. The trial we did 2 weeks ago was the first attempt at shipping bananas to France. So the information going around that we have shipped bananas to France and it was a failure, that's incorrect. But, Mr. Speaker, I can say that the French company is interested in our bananas, and we believe that there's a need for us to explore options. Mr. Speaker, what we believe there's need for us to implement a training program for our packers, our inspectors, and our farmers to address the quality issues that WinFresh is experiencing, because it is affecting our trade in the UK market. There's also need for us to review the inspection operations at the IRBC, because some of the farmers need to be inspected because of the way they're packing the fruits and the quality that we are realizing that they're sending up in the UK. And of course, there's need for us to continue discussing how we can undertake the branding initiative, which of course everybody believes that it's important. Mr. Speaker, in the short term, we have had discussion with WinFresh, and they have agreed to increase the allocation of product 11 by 3,000 boxes. And that figure was arrived at based on a meeting that the stakeholders had with Windfresh, including myself, and they have agreed to increase the allocation by 3,000 boxes weekly. But it's also important, Mr. Speaker, that we have discussion with the stakeholders to see how we can make the price more attractive for the non-fair trade pack types. And I'm saying that, Mr. Speaker, because we are hearing a lot about allocation. We heard a lot about the farmers not being able to sell the bananas. And I have attached to my presentation, which will be circulated, Mr. Speaker, information coming from Windfresh. And I just want to go through it quickly. For example, last week, in June 8th, that's the shipment for June 8th, Windfresh requested from NFTU 14,000 boxes. And the breakdown was small fruits, 4,600, and standard fruits, 9,400. 14,000 boxes. What did NFTU ship? 10,965 boxes. The question is, something is wrong. Here it is, your end farmers cannot sell the bananas because it's in the field. Here it is that NFTU is getting an allocation and they cannot fulfill it. Again, this week we shall be observing what's happening, because again this week they have increased the allocation from 14,000 boxes to 16,000 boxes. So I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that at the end of this week, our farmers will be able to sell the bananas based on the requests from NFTU. Mr. Speaker, we also believe that there's need for the NFTU to get Rainforest Alliance certification, because that's a new type, apart from the YOGAP, that's a new type of certification, and if they can get certified through the Rainforest Alliance certification program, at least we can sell more bananas in the UK market. Now, Mr. Speaker, based on the challenges that we have right now with the productivity improving, and that's a fact, with the productivity improving, we are seeing we're getting bigger fingers, and the market is gravitating to smaller fingers. So now we're going to demonstrate, Mr. Speaker, some technology to see how we can get a more balanced approach as it pertains to the fingers. So what we are going to demonstrate is to remove the top hand to see how it's going to affect the remainder of the fruits. So that's something we will demonstrate in the medium to long term. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we were told that Martinique is now engaged in what they call chemical-free bananas, and I'm sure one will appreciate that there's some collaboration between Martinique and ourselves, and we shall be engaging Martinique to see what our technology that they're using to get chemical-free bananas, so at least to see if our farmers can be exposed to that technology, because that's what the market is asking for. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this as we visit la nou fè nan Angleterre, this as we tout bagay ki fet abakod with Prime Minister, this as we tout se meeting nan nou jwen nan, moi kwe that nou an right direction nan. Sa nou kaywe, nou kay kontine ka pale pi Windfresh, nou kay kontine ka pale pi NFTO, nou ka wè produksyon ka moute, nou ka wè dat NFTO ka bay, Windfresh ka bay pre-allocation, but sa nou ka wè that allocation na Windfresh ka bay NFTO pa ka satisfy. So that's a problem, because pendant pas ça, yo pas ça 20 figures, et puis here it is that Windfresh ka bay NFTO allocation, et puis yo pas ka satisfy allocation. So ça n'a pas problem, which ministry can investigate pour assurer that program na nous mettre en place qui a fait bon succès. It's successful, Mr. Speaker, because it's out on the ground. You can hear all of the feedback from farmers. It's successful, but the reality is that farmers need to be able to sell their bananas, and we are going to do all in our powers to make sure that's happening. And that is why my Prime Minister saw the need, Mr. Speaker, to lead a delegation to the UK to have discussions with the respective stakeholders and see how they can give support to our banana production. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and I want to say thank you to all those who have worked diligently as it pertains to this banana industry, and we are looking forward for greater things in 2019. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Papers to be laid. Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and the Public Service.
Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 34 of 2019, Alien License Exemption, Royal Crescentia, St. Lucia Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 37 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 5 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 43 of 2019, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Electronic Litigation Filing and Service Procedure Amendment Rules. Statutory Instrument Number 45 of 2019, National Savings and Development Bonds Act, Resolution of Parliament to raise funds by the issue of saving bonds. Statutory Instrument Number 47 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 6 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 47A of 2019, Aliens Licensing Exemption, BDSL Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 48 of 2019, Citizenship by Investment Amendment Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 55 of 2019, Fiscal Incentives Nationwide Construction Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 57 of 2019, Legal Profession Eligibility, Carige Jovita Kelman Order. Statutory Instrument Number 59 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 60 of 2019, Maritime Areas Declaration of Continental Shelf and Exclusive Economic Zone, St. Lucia and Barbados Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument Number 61 of 2019, International Trust Forms Amendment Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 63 of 2019, Legal Profession Eligibility, Kendrickson Hugh Kentish Order. Statutory Instrument Number 63 of 2019, Fiscal Incentives Concrete Designs Limited Order.
Honorable Minister for Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport, and Civil Aviation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to read the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 65 of 2019, Telecommunications Exemption, Government Island-wide Wi-Fi Network Order.
Honorable Minister for Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Culture, and Creative Industries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to lay the following papers standing in my name. Mr. Speaker, Statutory Instrument Number 38 of 2019, Tourism Incentive Stonefield Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 39 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Stonefield Limited, Number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 40 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Stonefield Limited, Number 2 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 41 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Fordo Estate Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 49 of 2019, Tourism Incentives, Opeak Paradise Order. Statutory Instrument Number 50 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Carib Invest Capital Order. Statutory Instrument Number 51 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Bay Gardens Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 52 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Redman Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 53 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Kids Club Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 54 of 2019, Tourism Incentives, Torrail Waterfall ATV Park Inns order. Statutory instrument number 56 of 2019 Tourism Incentives, Pure Vibe Entertainment Inc. order. Statutory instrument number 62 of 2019 Tourism Incentives, Mystic Breeze order.
Honorable Minister for Commerce, Industry, Investment, Enterprise Development, and Consumer Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory instrument number 35 of 2019, Invest in Lucia Mikud Vesting Order. Statutory instrument number 36 of 2019, Price Control Amendment number 5 Order. Statutory instrument number 42 of 2019, Standards Compulsory Standards Amendment Order. Statutory instrument number 46 of 2019, Price Control Amendment number 6 Order. Statutory instrument number 58 of 2019, Price Control Amendment number 7 Order. Thank you.
Honorable Minister for Youth Development and Sports.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to present on behalf of the Minister of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development, the paper standing in her name, Statutory Instrument number 44 of 2019, Education, Suspension and Abolition of Corporal Punishment Order.
Motions. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 38(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that the Minister of Finance may, by resolution of Parliament, borrow money from a bank or other financial institution by means of advances to the amount not exceeding in the aggregate the sum specified in the resolution to meet current requirements, and as such resolution shall not have effect for any period exceeding 6 months. And whereas it is further provided by Section 38(2) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that the power conferred on the Minister of Finance to borrow money by means of advances from a bank may be exercised by means of a fluctuating overdraft. And whereas it is further provided by Section 42(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that all debt charges for which the government is liable shall be charged on and paid out of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance deems it necessary to borrow by means of advances from commercial banks sums not exceeding $55 million as follows. The Royal Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, $2.2 million. Royal Bank of Canada, $2.8 million. First Caribbean International Bank, $4 million. Bank of Nova Scotia, $6 million. First National Bank of St. Lucia, $2.5 million. And the Bank of St. Lucia, $37.5 million. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged and paid out of the consolidated fund. Mr. Speaker, the resolution seeks parliamentary approval for the Government of St. Lucia to borrow by means of advances to facilitate the renewal of overdraft facilities at commercial banks. This is a standard procedure, Mr. Speaker. It does not mean that we're increasing our level of debt, but this is certainly a turnover of an overdraft facility that we have. Section 38(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Chapter 1501, authorizes the Minister of Finance, by resolution of Parliament, to borrow money from a bank or other financial institution by means of advances to the amount not exceeding in the aggregate the sum specified for the purpose of the resolution to meet current requirements, and such resolution shall not have effect for any period exceeding 6 months. Parliament Resolution number 101 of 2018 authorized the Minister of Finance to borrow sums not exceeding $55 million outstanding at any one time by means of fluctuating overdraft with commercial banks. The overdraft facilities held at the various commercial banks are used to facilitate the timely settlement of government salaries and other operating expenses, meaning it's being used as cash flow. The aforementioned resolution will lapse on May 12, 2019, and in order that the government can legally access short-term borrowing to meet current requirements, it has become necessary to obtain parliamentary approval through a new resolution. Given current requirements and the short-term forecast of government's operating expenditure, including monthly salaries and the anticipated usage of the overdraft facility, the Ministry of Finance is of the view that $55 million limit is adequate. Accordingly, the Ministry proposes the following overdraft limits at the various commercial banks. And as I've indicated, Royal Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, RBTT, $2.2 million. Royal Bank of Canada, $2.8 million. First Caribbean International Bank, $4 million. The Bank of Nova Scotia, $6 million. First National Bank of St. Lucia, $2.5 million. And the Bank of St. Lucia, $37.5 million, for a total of $55 million. The overdraft facility is expected to generate an average interest cost for the financial year of approximately $500,000, which represents a cost of less than 1% of the facility. Overdraft borrowing by the government attracts interest ranging from 10% to 11.5% per annum at various commercial banks. However, with the advent of the regional government securities market, government has been able to borrow short-term funds by issuing treasury bills. Government of St. Lucia treasury bills has been able to attract interest rates as low as 1.99% on the regional market. The raising of funds on the regional market is not a complete substitute for the use of the overdraft facility. However, funds obtained from the RGSM plus the overdraft facility should be used in tandem, resulting in an effective management of cash flows and a reduction in the short-term interest cost.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sum shall be charged on and paid out of the consolidated fund. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided under Section 41 of the Finance Administration Act 1501 that a guarantee involving a financial liability is not binding on the government unless the Minister grants the guarantee in accordance with an enactment or with the prior approval of Parliament by a resolution of Parliament. And whereas it is further provided under Section 42 of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that any obligation arising from a guarantee given in accordance with Section 41 is a debt charge, and all debt charges for which the government is liable shall be charged on and paid out of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to guarantee a loan in the amount of $202,500,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited by the St. Lucia Air and Sea Ports Authority for the purpose of financing the Huronora International Airport redevelopment project. And whereas the loan is repayable over a period of 20 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years on the principal payments with the interest only paid. And whereas the interest is payable quarterly from the date of the initial disbursement of the loan amount and is payable at the rate of 5.5% per annum during the grace period of 5 years. And whereas the interest is payable in semi-annually at a rate of up to 5% per annum at the expiry of the grace period of 5 years. And whereas the commitment fee of 0.75% is payable on the disbursement of the loan. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to guarantee a loan in the amount of EC $202,500,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited by the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority for the purpose of financing the Hunori International Airport redevelopment project. Be it resolved that the loan is repayable over a period of 20 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years on the principal payments with interest only paid. Interest is payable quarterly and from the date of the initial disbursement of the loan amount and is payable at the rate of 5.5% per annum during the grace period of 5 years. The interest is payable semi-annually at a rate of up to 5% per annum at the expiry of the grace period of 5 years. A commitment fee of 0.75% is payable on the disbursement of the loan. The government of St. Lucia is providing a guarantee of a loan of $75 million from a syndicate of banks led by the Bank of St. Lucia for the Hunori International Airport redevelopment project. The objective of the HIA redevelopment project are, we all know, to alleviate the congestion during peak arrival and departure times, which contributes to the discomfort of the passengers and impacts negatively on the passenger experience, and to accommodate anticipated future growth in the air passenger traffic. 2, to implement urgent investments that will position SLASPA to take advantage of St. Lucia's competitive advantage as an ideal location for a hub for regional travels and to improve the earning potential of SLASPA. And 3, to expand the infrastructure of St. Lucia and increase the capacity of the country to accommodate growth in tourism. The HIA comprises a 92,070 square foot terminal building, a 109 square foot tower, a 9,000 foot runway, and 6 parking aprons totaling 352,916 square feet. While periodic renovations to the runway and apron have taken place, there have been little changes to the main superstructure and supporting systems since 1993, when the current terminal building was opened. The main terminal building was constructed at a time when the number of passengers handled annually was 315,000, and aircraft size and regulatory environments were much less demanding. As of the end of 2017, HIA handled 715,955 passengers with 16,879 aircraft movements. The HIA is currently operating well beyond its limits, with the terminal building in particular straining to accommodate passengers at peak times. These and other shortcomings of the facility have compromised the ability of the HIA to facilitate increased traffic and improve the quality of guest experiences. It has also contravened several international security protocols, particularly as it relates to both inbound and outbound passengers interacting with each other as a traveler as they traverse the facility, meaning that passengers are commingling. The redevelopment of HIA will alleviate the many challenges which plague the airport and would ensure that the facility can cater to the anticipated growth in the tourism industry by accommodating more airlines in the airport space. The expected outputs from the redevelopment includes, carefully, a new terminal building, control tower, apron taxiway, airfield and ground lighting system, and a car park and roadway. Notice that it does not include the resurfacing of the existing runway, nor does it include the proposed new taxiway. The government of St. Lucia reintroduced the airport development charge of $35 per departing passenger, effective of January 2018. The intention is for these funds to be used by SLASPA to repay its loan for the redevelopment of HIA. The terms and conditions governing the line of credit are as follows. A guarantee of a loan for the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority in the sum of US $75 million, or EC $202,500,000, for a syndicate of banks led by the Bank of St. Lucia as follows. The loan is repayable over a period of 20 years with a 60-month moratorium on a principal payments. During the period, only interest payments will be made. The moratorium is inclusive of the project term, which is estimated at 30 months. Interest payments shall be made quarterly from a date of the first disbursement of funds to SLASPA and shall be made quarterly during the 60-month moratorium. Once the 60-month period has expired, payments will be made monthly, which will be a mix of both interest and principal. Interest will be calculated at 5.5% per annum during the 60-month moratorium period and 5% per annum once the moratorium period has expired. Once the moratorium has expired, payments made on the loan will comprise of both interest and principal payments. A commitment fee of 0.75% is payable upon disbursement of the funds. A legal and out-of-pocket expenses incurred in connection with the facility are the responsibility of the borrower, which is SLASPA. So again, Mr. Speaker, we're very encouraged that the local financial community have been able to put this syndicate together to be able to participate in this Hunora International Airport. Again, a bank makes money by lending money. And we're very encouraged that local banks have come together to take advantage and to participate in this major project. Again, the project is being funded by the $35 tax that we're collecting. Government is simply providing a guarantee on top of that in order to give the banks the necessary security that they would require. I'm also encouraged at the very competitive interest rates that we've received. So even if you look at the terms that we have with the Taiwanese Exim Bank, it's the same 20 years with the same 5-year moratorium. The difference is that the Taiwanese loan is LIBOR plus 1.5%. Members of the House would recognize that under this syndicated loan, we have a fixed interest payment of 5.5% for the first 5 years, and then 5% for the remaining 15 years. And certainly it is the intention of the government of St. Lucia that if we have the capacity, and I believe that we will, to pay this loan off quicker, that's clearly what the intention is. With regards to this amount of money going onto our national debt, it's a fact that it will. It's an argument that we continue to have with the international institutions, because under the concession agreement, the funds that were coming to pay for the concession were coming from the same airport tax. The difference was it was $60 versus $35. And simply because it was being handed to a third party to be able to manage, international institutions don't consider it to be part of your debt. We've had, I think, very successful meetings thus far with the credit rating agencies as well as international agencies, that this loan is not putting St. Lucia under any strain, as the $35 is more than adequate to be able to cover the funding requirements for the repayment of the loan. It's important to note that the monies to repay the loan are coming out of the $35, and there will be no pressure on the consolidated fund in any way to be able to support this loan agreement. So this is, when we talk about putting developments together and generating their own revenue and new streams of revenue, this is exactly what we're talking about. So again, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that I've been able to make an adequate presentation, and I look forward to the support of Parliament.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to guarantee a loan in the amount of EC 202,500,000 from the Bank of St. Lucia Limited by the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority for the purpose of financing the Hunora International Airport redevelopment project. And be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable over a period of 20 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years on the principal payments with interest only paid. B, the interest is payable quarterly from the date of the initial disbursement of the loan amount and is payable at a rate of 5.5% per annum during a grace period of 5 years. C, the interest is payable semi-annually at a rate of up to 5% per annum at the expiry of the grace period of 5 years. D, a commitment fee of 0.7% is payable on the disbursement of the loan. Honorable Member for Library.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to add my voice to this very important debate. If one listened very carefully to the Prime Minister, he made this borrowing seem like a walk in the park. And listening to him, if I did not know better, Mr. Speaker, I would have been inspired. I have great difficulty, Mr. Speaker, in actually getting my consent to support this borrowing. And everything is sensitive to context, Mr. Speaker. Everything is sensitive to context. Had we gone with the arrangement with the World Bank, this year, the airport redevelopment would have been completed. And it is sad that the Prime Minister allowed 3 years to just go by. And now he comes to the House and talk about the problems being experienced at Iwanora International Airport. But as I said, Mr. Speaker, everything is sensitive to context. And since coming into office, Mr. Speaker, whatever the pretenses to the contrary, this government has not been borrowing to explore practical realization in critical projects that would uplift the various constituencies in St. Lucia. They have not been borrowing to invest in the productive sectors of the economy. They have not been borrowing to encourage prudent fiscal management of the country. They have not been borrowing to provide resources to at least help the productive enterprises in this country. They have not been borrowing for us to try to match the skills with the requirements of the economy, or to borrow to invest in early childhood development programs. They have never built on the platform laid by the former SLP administration to create a sustainable, growing, job-creating economy. They have not been borrowing, Mr. Speaker, to expand the public works programs to include both labor-intensive construction and social services to address the causes and consequences of poverty. They have not been borrowing to reducing disparities in access to education. They took away the laptop programs, and we'll see in a while what they have been doing for the past 3 years. They have not been borrowing to finance the development of support programs to farmers, to ensure the appropriate use of land and appropriate land use data collection systems for planning and monitoring purposes. They have not been borrowing, Mr. Speaker, to accelerate the implementation of social programs that will help prevent crime from taking place. They have not been borrowing to enhance the capacity of the intelligence structures and the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. They have not been borrowing to improve access to health care for St. Lucians. For the past 3 years, Mr. Speaker, up to last night, I was in the immediate vicinity of the St. Joe's Hospital. And it was sad that after 3 years, instead of going and complete the hospital, they have decided to engage in foolishness and have not gone to the original site and complete the buildings. Mr. Speaker, the government has been borrowing to invest in projects that are not even of marginal relevance to the development of St. Lucia. Outside of the normal borrowing to finance our recurrent expenditure, debt, etc., the normal things that we do, they have come here to borrow. For the pack company, $42 million. Abandonment of a meat processing facility, $25 million. Acquisition of land for meat processing facility, another $12 million. Building of an unnecessary road for T.O. King's DSH, $13 million. 13, I was told. Well, is it 13, Mr. Prime Minister, not 13? Awarding of Permandu a contract for vision planning of over $30 million, when during the campaign period preceding their arrival, they were criticizing us for having a vision committee. They said they had the plan, but yet still, Permandu is being given $30 million to just see me Gwen Puin and pay his secrecy. Acquisition of debt-laden Caribbean jewels property, over $100 million. And Mr. Prime Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, if all the things that I have said are incorrect, then the Prime Minister is free to intervene. While they have been borrowing, they have not been borrowing to implement our national priorities. That is what they have been doing. On things that are of no developmental value to the people of this country or for the future of this country. And now, this HIA redevelopment must be viewed in that wider context, Mr. Speaker. In that wider context. What is even more disturbing to me is that over the period of the 3 years, we have been cautioning the government, go ahead with the PPP arrangement with the World Bank and stop wasting time and resources. I told them that that $150 million that they borrowed recently would be insufficient. I have told them that they shifted the building away from the original site to closer to the river, and obviously it's going to have cost implications, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but my compelling arguments for going ahead with the World Bank were as follows, and I said that in the last budget debate, and just to remind this Honorable House, and I quote, $170 million is a major investment to expand and upgrade Iwanora International Airport, which the country could avoid at this time, given its high debt to GDP ratio. Matching the provision of airport capacity with the demand while achieving and maintaining airport profitability and an adequate level of customer satisfaction is a difficult task. It is made particularly difficult because investments to expand airport capacity are lumpy, increasing effective capacity by much more than is needed in the short term, and because they must be planned long in advance. Uncertainty is inherent in developing and operating complex infrastructure and services, projects like airports, and it is for this very reason that government officials seek public-private partnership to mitigate complex risk. Hence, the arrangement we had with the World Bank was soundly based and for fiscal risk to be effectively mitigated. And privatization of airports could bring some much needed additional private money for investment. Unquote. I informed this Honorable House that this is standard practice in airport finance. For example, I invoke the authority of Norman Ashford and Clifford A. Moore in the publication Airport Finance on page 65. It states, and I quote, "The pressure to move airports out of the public sector is widespread throughout the world. And the international financial markets will become even more important in the development of airport financing." Unquote. That same source continued on page 66, and I quote, "In terms of lending volume, the World Bank Group is the largest agency in the world providing financial and technical assistance to developing countries in all loan and credit transactions. Major emphasis is placed on project appraisal. The procedures used are designed to ensure a satisfactory rate of return on investment and a high priority of the project in a general development sense." Unquote. The publication, Air Transport Infrastructure, the roles of the public and private sectors, infrastructure economics and finance network, the World Bank, it states, and I quote, "Private operations of airports has disclosed substantial efficiency gains. For example, better and longer use of existing assets. Often, however, the sector has performance and fiscal risks that need to be carefully managed by governments." unquote. The conclusion of those studies are fully supported by research undertaken by other experts in the field of air transport economics and finance. And therefore, at this juncture, Mr. Speaker, I wish to invoke the authority of Professor Doganis in this publication, Airport Development, on page 50 to 51 on the economic characteristics of airports. And I quote, "Major development programs push up unit cost. A major new terminal has to be cooled, heated, lighted, cleaned, and maintained, and even with the number of passengers using it well below the design capacity. As a result, unit costs per passenger rise, often dramatically, and airports having undertaken major expansion schemes often find themselves losing money. Conversely, smaller airports that hold back on investment, even though they are heavily congested at peak periods, may actually achieve profitability despite the smaller traffic throughput and higher unit cost. The implications are clear. Airports should hold back investment as long as possible if they want to keep the unit cost of production low. In addition, they should avoid grandiose developments which entail very large jumps," unquote. And I remember saying to this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, I am not suggesting that we hold back on the airport development, but we allow the World Bank to undertake the development whilst we free our hands to take care of the pressing but legitimate needs of the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, the dual airport operation in St. Lucia was a natural choice to allow the World Bank to undertake that development, because regional traffic and international traffic are split between the two airports. And as long you have that scenario, what meaningful hub operation you are going to have? And a casual glance at the experience of other countries will reveal that. In Germany, in the heart of the city, you had an airport that could have taken care of traffic. The infrastructure was perfect. But because it was reaching its capacity, another airport was built outside of the city center. And despite the fact that the majority of people lived in the city center, they closed down the city center airport and consolidated traffic in that one airport. And today it's a major hub. Hong Kong had a city center airport. They flattened some islands to build a modern airport. And they actually linked that airport via bridges to the land. And today it's a major magnet in that particular area. But in Malaysia, they built an airport outside of the city center and kept the city center airport open. So passengers from the city center used to take a flight to Singapore and go to London, go to North America, go to other parts of the world. And it was simply not working out as a hub. After a while, they closed down the city center airport and started to realize the advantages of being a hub. So when the Prime Minister says that he wants to build a hub, he cannot have his cake and eat it. And again, airports do not have control over what routes airlines fly. The airlines are the ones who determine that based on route analysis and the global competition for air services. Not airports. Airports provide a place to facilitate business. But airports are not in direct control. What you can do is to mitigate some fallout by what you do at home. But certainly, in terms of the monies in a lockbox mechanism to finance this and to finance that, we have no direct control over those things, Mr. Speaker. So the arrangement with the World Bank had the potential to be fully financially self-sustaining, and the government's role could have just been focused primarily on safety and security regulation. Mr. Speaker, I told this Honorable House that given the change of the location of the terminal building, it would have caused implications as they are moving a major investment to a vulnerable area. Even where the existing terminal building is, Mr. Speaker, during heavy rains, you get flooding at the airport. Are we going to come here and borrow another set of millions, Mr. Speaker, to go and deal with the river? Already, the river was diverted, of course, to accommodate the airport where it is. What plans do you have to deal with that river if you are going to take a major terminal building and put it closer to the river? And today, Mr. Speaker, this government is back here. On top of the $150 million they came here to guarantee, we are back here with a guarantee to borrow a motion to borrow $202 million, 500,000. It begs the question, is this additional borrowing? Or is it because Taiwan has not released the funds for the terminal because you have not satisfied all the requirements? You see, Mr. Speaker, countries or financial institutions do not just give you money to build things just like that, especially a terminal. You, as a St. Lucian, would go and build a house. Planning would require a plan. And if you are going to get financing from the banks would generate a bill of quantities on that plan to come up with an approximate cost of the building. And sometimes you still go into cost overrun. But an airport is much more complex than building a house. And what is it that they come with? Under the former Labour Party administration, a master plan was done to inform the planning and execution of works. That is important. And Mr. Speaker, ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, Annex 14, an Aerodrome Design Manual document 9157, and the Master Planning Manual document 9184 clearly established the guides for the planning, the guidelines for the planning and development of an airport. Airport planning is a systematic process used to establish guidelines for the efficient development of airports. A key objective of airport planning is to assure the effective use of airport resources in order to satisfy aviation demand in a financially feasible fashion. Mr. Speaker, an airport master plan is invaluable in this regard, as the primary objectives of the airport master plan are to develop an attainable phase development plan concept that will satisfy the needs of the airport in a safe, efficient, economical, and environmentally sound fashion. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, an airport master plan presents the airport blueprint for long-term development. A few of the goals of a master plan: provide a graphic representation of existing airport features, future airport development, and anticipated land use. To establish a realistic schedule for implementation of the proposed development. To identify a realistic financial plan to support the development. To validate the plan technically and procedurally through investigation of concepts and alternatives on technical, economic, and environmental grounds. To prepare and present a plan to the public that adequately addresses all relevant issues and satisfies local, state, and federal regulations where those things are applicable. And to establish a framework for a continuous planning process. Whilst the former SLP administration, to inform the scope of works, did a master plan, by altering the existing location of the terminal, were those things done, Mr. Speaker? Did we undertake master planning? Did we look at the environmental impact assessment? Did we do all of those things to inform? And if all of those things are in place, then I believe by now funds would have been available from the $150 million that we borrowed some time ago to start the project. So, Mr. Speaker, is this government respectful of the recommendations of the many technical reports that have been conducted on the Hiwanora International Airport? For example, the land use plan for Hiwanora International Airport, which was prepared by Acres International Limited for Transport Canada under the Canadian International Development Agency in 1987. The report found that certain existing facilities, both on and off airport property, violate ICAO's Annex 14 zoning criteria for strip width and transitional surfaces. The report stated that zoning violations could only be solved by the acquisition of additional lands along the southern airport perimeter, both within the town and from NDC. The report also made the following recommendations: to protect lands around the disused runway. All of those questions must be asked in relation to the proposed development that this government wants to undertake in a vitae fashion. There is no clear thinking, no clear plan. So already we are in a land use problem, and they want to land us in a financial disaster, Mr. Speaker. So no action was initiated based on the report that was presented, and now they are actually encroaching. Instead of protecting the lands around the airport, they have built road for Teoaking, a road that's highly unnecessary, a very costly undertaking, whilst my people in Labrie, Alan Louise Street must endure that deplorable condition. The main road in Labrie, the Carter Road. And only recently, Mr. Speaker, and I made this point in this Honorable House, that I was going to intervene on the Carter Road, and I did. I had to bring relief to the people because that road was impassable. There's a lady called Miss Ellis right up. An ambulance could not go there to access the lady's house. She cannot walk. And now, any toy car, any racing car can go there because I have intervened on that road to bring relief. I could have gone to every barn all over the place just backed up the government. I will not do that. I will not lie down on the ground and roll. I will do things that I can, and I expect the government to join me in bringing relief to the people of my constituency. And so while they have $13 million to go and build a road for Teoaking and his horses, you know, they do not have money to invest in the real productive things in the country. And they come here to borrow for airport development. Huh? You came here $150 million US from the Taiwanese. You come here 202.5 million. Next time, how much you going to ask for? 500 million? $500 million next time? And it goes on and on, instead of allowing the World Bank to undertake the development. Today, we would not have that debate in this House. Had the government come in, allow the World Bank to undertake the development, we would not be coming here to talk about that. We would be coming here to discuss investment in the real productive sectors of the economy. The laptop programs for the children. Are we going to expand employment in this country? Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, that after 3 years, nothing has been done, and they only beat in the chest, but elections are coming? You know, when you talk about employment creation, with the Royalton and Harbour Club, the Labour Party allowed hundreds of jobs to be created. And we have been in a very fortunate situation that a number of people who were looking for jobs in St. Lucia have found jobs outside of the country. Because the hurricanes destroyed Dominica, St. Martin, you have a number of our skilled people out there. And yet still, you cannot boast of a significant reduction realistically in unemployment. So, Mr. Speaker, we have been cautioning this government about its reckless and unnecessary borrowing. But when elections are fast approaching and there's nothing to show, like I said, for the millions it has borrowed, it will do anything and everything to expedite the commencement of the Hiwanora International Airport. I'm hearing so many things, Mr. Speaker. I'm hearing that they are going to expand the existing terminal building in a northern direction, taking that main road in front of the terminal building. So I think since I'm on my feet in this house and we are discussing this particular issue, that I can ask the Prime Minister whether those works are actually going to be undertaken at Hiwanora to deal with the existing terminal building instead of allowing the normal gestation period for things to be done properly. You see, Mr. Speaker, you see this conversation in this country where, oh, they should have done it already during the term in office. Yeah, you all didn't do it. So we are going to show you all how we can do it. There is a gestation period for everything. In fact, in airport planning, it would say it takes between 5 and 10 years to plan and implement a project. So you must have all the technical details done before you could do it. But we hear, oh, you all should have done it, you all should have completed the building. It's like you get married, and after 2 months your wife is pregnant. Where's the baby? Where is the baby? The baby is supposed to come in 2 months. We need to step away from that attitude and allow the proper gestation period to prevail. In 2 months you'll not get a baby that's healthy. You'll not get any baby. So wait for 9 months. And sometimes the child may be born prematurely at 7 months. You want a full-term baby. And we took our time to develop what we were going to do at Hiwanora. And then we're going to implement. But no, the microwave government, they can make everything happen. But they are now realizing that things don't happen quite the way that they believe it's going to happen. You think that you just roll on a government and say, I need money now to invest in this. And I've said before, any financial facility, agency, institution that would give money for any development that will not insist on proper procedure, we are going to look at this thing very seriously when we return to office very shortly. Very shortly. Because you see elections coming, they're getting all hot and sweaty. You know, they run there, they're on television there, they're trying to create things. But the people of this country know better. They know that this airport could have been completed this year. They know that by now St. Jude's would have been completed. But the gallery for freers. Yo si men couillon pour 3 l'année. Et qu'à présent élection vini, yo vle tout bay fait. So, Mr. Speaker, we have told this government that at the rate it is borrowing, we might be confronted with a scenario where a sharp reduction in spending would have serious repercussions for our country because of the need to cut spending in the future. You know, high deficits are not sustainable forever, Mr. Speaker. And reducing a budget deficit can be problematic. If a country has a deficit that increases too quickly, the government may be forced to adopt policies aimed at a sharp reduction. And these austerity measures can cause a fall in aggregate demand. When you jam the brakes too abruptly on spending, you might create a recession in the country and do not recover from the situation. Mr. Speaker, we have gone down that road before. In the period 2006 to 2011, we had a very high fiscal deficit inching toward 10% in the economy. When we came in 2011, we had that same situation where we were warning the government during 2006-2011 of those high debt to GDP ratio and high fiscal deficits, but they were not listening. They were busy spending for elections, so there were fiscal slippages in the economy. Consequently, when we came into office in 2011, government investment was necessarily constrained by the tight fiscal policy in pursuit of macroeconomic stability, Mr. Speaker. Hence, we had to stabilize the economy before we could have engaged in serious borrowing. Consequently, in 2013, we had fiscal space to maneuver and borrowed US $20 million for St. Jude's Hospital. And they came in and abruptly stopped it. Mr. Speaker, go and do the Cartier Road and Majormel. Go and do Cartier and Majormel. Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned with the heavy borrowing from our local banks. In this case, Bank of St. Lucia. And I heard the Prime Minister saying, you know, the banks are in a business of making money. You know, the Prime Minister is boasting on one end that things are happening in the economy. You swear that this economy is growing like a homesick angel, you know, climbing because they want to get to heaven. Behaving like that. But you see, Mr. Speaker, if that is the case, you allow the private sector to invest more. You don't compete with the private sector for investment. And at a certain point, they will want to sell bonds. And they say, oh, you know, it is good. The people will get returns on bonds. But if somebody has $1,000 to invest in bonds, they do not have that $1,000 to invest in something else. So it does not matter how you look at the scenario, there'll be the crowding out effect. And $202.5 million is a significant amount. And so when the Prime Minister make it sound as if, you know, things are so nice, you know, and then the banks should be happy that government is coming to borrow. That's not how things work. So, Mr. Speaker, as I prepare to close, I must ask myself, where are we with that loan from Taiwan? Where are we with the loan from Taiwan? That we cannot wait, we have to go to Bank of St. Lucia. And I'm hoping that Bank of St. Lucia does not engage in some activity that will compromise them. In the sense that if all of those requirements are not yet in place for the Taiwanese to release the funds, then Bank of St. Lucia should not release those monies. Unless there's a master plan, unless everything is in place. Because you see, when you build in a house, you build in any structure, they want plan. Health needs to approve. Everything must be in order. And airport redevelopment is not a joke. It's a very costly undertaking. And I'm very concerned that this is not the last time we have seen this government come in here to ask us to allow SLASPA to borrow so we can guarantee. It's going to impact the debt to GDP ratio of the country. And when that happens, it will prevent us from actually borrowing to invest in the real emergencies. You know, we have a visitor every year in our region, hurricanes, and they talk about climate change in a very casual fashion. But it's real, Mr. Speaker. And we have more active hurricane seasons. And the people remain at the stadium. This government is very, very callous and insensitive where those matters are concerned. They don't listen. You want to come in, you have your own agenda for development, allow the PPP to continue, you remodel the economy, and you build on what you find. But no, you want to destroy everything and come with some brand new idea that's like Espoir Malpapai projects. Look at the annexation of the Beauséjour lands to do things for Tioa King. Huh? Papi show that's going on there. Nonsense. And you expect to come on the south and the south and the south and the south? What is the total cost of the airport, Mr. Speaker? We must ask. Because we come in there, you know, in a piecemeal basis we are borrowing. Where are we going with this airport? How will that impact BOSL? I'm hoping that Prime Minister could illuminate those issues. Hopefully it would lead to a deeper understanding of the spectrum of issues that I have raised. I have a spectrum of concerns. And I know when the member for Castries South East comes to add his voice to this debate, he will provide some of those responses. He will. But all they had to do was to allow the World Bank to undertake the development because all the planning requirements were in place, and the government has chosen to go down a very problematic route, and we are going to have problems. Even if they started the airport in June, you would not have airport by the time election comes. You will not have airport. You'll be there next time. By not building St. Jude's, by closing down Radio St. Lucia, fish marketing cooperation, everything. You believe that you're okay? My time is up, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this type of reckless borrowing. I cannot support borrowing for something that we did not have to come to this house to borrow. Education, healthcare, fine. To assist farmers legitimately, yes. Our emphasis is on a little contract there, a little contract there. We cannot grow an economy on that basis, Mr. Speaker. And this is where I'm going to close. If we do not invest in the productive capacity of the economy, we are going to have even more problems. Because contracts will come to an end after we do things. But we're not building capacity for our young professionals who go out and study to find jobs here. And they will migrate. And the economy is going to shrink. And we are going to have problems in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am hoping that this government would revisit, even at this stage, revisit its approach to the Hiwanora Airport redevelopment and do what is right. It is not too late for them to go back to the World Bank and say, I'm sorry, I believe we made a mistake, we are back, and we are back on track, and come and do this thing for us, please. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
No. Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Member for Micro Viewfort North, are you intending to speak, sir? Be a little more. All right? Mr. Prime Minister, I'm asking you to permit him to speak. I saw your light first, but I'm asking you to permit him because his light is on. That's
Mr. Speaker,
no.
we hesitated.
Sir, yes, I know. That is why I said to him, put some speed into his in turning on his lights. That's all. That's all.
Really?
That's all.
Sorry?
That's all I said.
So I can proceed?
No, I'm asking you, Honorable Prime Minister. He turned on his light, though late. I'm asking you to permit him to address the House.
No, Mr. Speaker. He had plenty of time to put on his light, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, he did.
I sat back and I waited, and nobody put on
Honorable members, honorable members, and Mr. Prime Minister, yes, I recognize that. I did. Okay?
We're letting him speak?
Mr. Prime Minister, that's fine.
Well, on the basis of what? I sat back, I waited, Mr. Speaker, for anybody, that if they want to speak, speak. But I waited. And by the time I was up is when he put his light on. I want to just know if the rules are going to change in the House, and that's going to be applied across the board.
But you in power.
I mean, I thought we have some rules in the House.
Almighty, you're almighty.
Honorable Member for Viewfort North, please, sir.
Sorry.
I don't understand, Mr. Speaker. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just the childish game. No, I'm not going to be calm, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking.
Honorable Prime Minister, yes, he was late in turning on his lights. Let's understand something here. He was late. I noted, I waited, but he was late. However, by the time you turn on his light, that's when he finally got to his switch and turned off his light. All I am asking, the fact that he has indicated his willingness to speak by turning on his light.
Mr. Speaker.
That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Mr. Speaker,
It's an exercise of discretion.
Mr. Speaker, the standing orders say who catches your eye first. Are you not acknowledging that you caught my eye, and it's on the basis of that I stood up? And then after the fact, you notice he put his hand, and through your own admission, you said after the fact.
I have accepted all of what you just said.
So
but the exercise of a discretion, that's all I'm asking.
But I'm not asking. The fact is the statutory standing orders are very clear. Who catches your eye first? I waited, I caught your eye, and it gave me permission to stand up, of which I have done. Now you're asking me, Mr. Speaker, to sit down, because now, through your own discretion, you want to allow another member of the House, after the fact, to be able to speak.
He has that discretion.
Yes, it's discretionary.
I voice my objection
Yes.
to that.
And so noted, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I always intended to speak. It was my little misunderstanding that somebody else from the other side would have spoken, and therefore I thank you for the discretion. I always intended to speak, Mr. Speaker. As a member of Parliament for Vieux-Fort North, while the airport is not in the constituency of Vieux-Fort North, it is in the constituency of Vieux-Fort South, but activities at Iwanura International Airport impact the whole country, but in particular, when you speak of physical activities, whether it be in the so-called DSH area or at Iwanura, clearly impact the constituency of Vieux-Fort North. So I'm happy that I have an opportunity to speak. But Mr. Speaker, how can I believe the Prime Minister? As a member of Parliament, how can I believe the Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, you recall the $100 million loan. You recall, Mr. Speaker, all of the debates as to whether we should take a loan of $100 million over 270 million EC dollars, or whether we should go the way of the World Bank, the advisor of the World Bank. You recall then, Mr. Speaker, members opposite clamoring and indicating that they knew what they were doing and that the government had everything in place. We argued then, Mr. Speaker, that the government did not show clearly how they were going to finance the redevelopment of the Iwanura International Airport. We argued then, Mr. Speaker, that the government through SLASPA had not been transparent and had not declared the plans for the airport, had not discussed adequately with the people of St. Lucia, and that the government was placing a guarantee then of over 270 million EC dollars on the backs of the people of St. Lucia through SLASPA. We argued and argued. But today, Mr. Speaker, we are back here. We are back here and the government comes to guarantee $202,500,000. So in all, Mr. Speaker, $472,500,000. How can I believe them, Mr. Speaker? How can I believe the Prime Minister? Qui manière, Mr. Speaker, moi ça quoi ça Premier ministre l'a dit en les affaires aéroport ça là. Là yo vini premier coup, yo vini pour 100 millions de dollars américains. Et yo dit yo kay wanger airport là. Nous dit qui manière ça difficile pour comprendre parce que personne pas qu'on plan avec ça gouvernement ka mouchoué c'est bagay computer fait n'importe maman qui ça fait lui ça fait ça mais yo ka fait go cérémonie pour mouchoué ces bagay ça là avec personne pas assuré qui ça qui en boyo ça fait porte ça là nous te dit qui nous pas te ka point ça gouvernement ka fait en toute vallée parce que nous pas te quoi ça gouvernement ka fait qui c'est ça qui tout l'argent pour bâtir airport. Aujourd'hui, nous avons vu à Parlement, le gouvernement voulait en haut 200 millions, 2 millions 500 000 dollars, il dit pour bâtir airport. Mr. Speaker, how can you believe them? How can I believe them on behalf of my constituents? Close to $500 million, Mr. Speaker. It is very clear that the increase in the debt guarantee is not of concern to them. It is very clear, Mr. Speaker, that based on the performance of this government, that those issues are of no concern to them. What is important to them, Mr. Speaker, based on what I have seen, is that they can award direct awards up to the tune of $500 million, Mr. Speaker. What is important to this government is that they can cause a contractor from Taiwan to get to build the airport without tendering, Mr. Speaker. That is what's important to them. And so it feeds into the character of this government. Yo pa mele si c'est $600 million guarantee. Yo pa mele avec ça. Caractère c'est pour bailler gros l'argent cette ici pour gros contracteur sortir l'autre pays. Et c'est ça qu'ils ont fait avec premier par aéroport. So all of what you will hear, Mr. Speaker, from them, I can predict what they will say. Rochamel, I can predict what they will say. But the future of St. Lucia, the future of the debt situation of St. Lucia is not what is important to them. It is direct awards. Combien de monde qui s'ajoignent c'est go l'argent ça là? Et c'est pas cet lycéen, Mr. Speaker. No tendering, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you will recall we warned them that they will have to come back to the house to borrow more money. Et c'est pas si l'argent c'est go l'argent. But why? Why must the government go that way? What is the compelling reason, Mr. Speaker? And my comrade, the member from Library, asked the same question. What has happened to the $270 million from the Taiwan Import-Export Bank? Qui ça qui a empêché l'argent ça défléché? Après, il y a une grosse cérémonie qui a montré un gros portrait, Mr. Speaker. There was a ceremony with renderings and all sorts of things. What has happened to the $270 million from the Taiwan Import-Export Bank? What has happened to it? Why is it taking so much time? I can recall, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition saying right here in this house that the Taiwanese better be careful that every I is dotted and every T is crossed where this loan is concerned. I can also recall that this statement, Mr. Speaker, was not only received here in the Parliament. I know of messages that came from far and wide. And I can only guess that the Taiwanese are dotting every I and crossing every T, Mr. Speaker. Because we will not go gently into the night where this is concerned. We will not go gently into the night after all what has happened with Taiwanese funds, with the United Workers' Party, Mr. Speaker. And today we are here again. And it's connected to the loan, the first loan that was guaranteed here of $100 million from the Taiwan Import-Export Bank. Because this loan guarantee today is connected to it, Mr. Speaker. because we are speaking about airport development. Nous pas qu'à acide, Mr. Speaker, avec qu'à accepter que le gouvernement a garanti 100 millions de dollars l'argent méritien sorti Taïwan. Avec les leaders de l'opposition ont fait qui c'est Taïwanais là pour garder ça bien. Parce que nous pas qu'à aller dormir en l'argent cette ici. 100 millions de dollars américains. And the leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, also cautioned the technocrats who are involved in this operation to dot every I and cross every T. Because today the government is back for $202 million, Mr. Speaker. The question I ask myself is, how will these millions be divided? How will these millions be divided? How many direct awards will come out of the $202 million? Because that is what this government is about. And can you believe them, Mr. Speaker? Can you really believe this Prime Minister? Can you believe them when they come here and pontificate about this airport? The road which was built, the reported $13 million road, was built because of DSH. After much protest, the Prime Minister and his ministers indicated that no, it's for the airport. Can you really trust them? What is the truth? What is the reality? And if you go to this road, Mr. Speaker, you notice a section going right along the river. And the member for Labrie is correct. While we are not engineers, we have lived in this area. I was raised in La Richousse. While I'm from Grace, Mr. Speaker, I was raised in La Richousse. I lived many years in La Richousse. La Richousse, Vieux-Fort. And I know how this river behaves. And so, as parliamentarians, we question the wisdom of this section of road passing right next to fiberglass and going south. Parce que nous connaissons la rivière La Richousse là. Nous connaissons la rivière. We know what happened, Mr. Speaker, when the unfortunate incident when a hero lost his life when the waters came through this area. And so can we trust the government in terms of what they are planning to do there? And why are they going this way? Can we trust them, Mr. Speaker, when financing, just as they're trying to finance this airport, we saw intentions to finance the St. Jude Hospital. We saw a hotly debated letter, the Pajoa letter. That one saying it's not his signature. That other one saying it may be the signature. And no investigations. Can we really trust them? And even though the terminal building is required, can we trust them, Mr. Speaker? And why did you really start without the approved plans? Just like this St. Jude Hospital, what they call the wing, which is no wing at all, Mr. Speaker. You're tired of confusing people. Just like the Minister for Agriculture earlier tried to confuse us with the banana exports. Why are they continuing to try to confuse us? And what is the role of the so-called DSH in the interaction with the terminal building? And what is the role of the so-called DSH in the interaction with the airport master plan? Why is there so much secrecy, Mr. Speaker? For $202 million additional dollars, why is there so much secrecy? Qui manière Jean cette ici passe à ça avec exactement ça qu'a fait avec airport là. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? I'm not surprised. They're not being transparent at all. Just as they were not transparent on the WePay matter, they're not transparent with this $202 million and this airport terminal building. So why can't we trust them now? Why Why do we have to trust this Prime Minister now, Mr. Speaker? This government, as the member for Labrie said, they're seeking a shortcut to ensure that there is fat and grease in the ensuing period, in the upcoming period, Mr. Speaker. That is what's happening. This is what I believe. And you know what? What is interesting, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this airport terminal and what this government is doing? The Prime Minister continues to show his character, Mr. Speaker. You remember when it was DSH? He went to Viewfort and he said, we're living in a ghetto, do you want to live in the Pearl of the Caribbean? And so he has gone back to Viewfort. And there is this picture of so many young Viewfortian boys looking at this photograph, and they're reporting that the boys are filled with glee, and they're so happy. This is the same Prime Minister who went to Viewfort and told these same young boys that there would be 400 horses and at least 800 of them would be cleaning horses, Mr. Speaker. That's the same Prime Minister. The same one. In his budget address, he told the same young men of Viewfort that there will be 800 jobs.
Honorable member, come back on track.
Mr. Speaker, the promises have been there before. Gouvernement vient prêter 200 millions dollars pour bâtir aéroport, Mr. Speaker. Avec même drawing aéroport ça là, qui gouvernement vient chercher l'argent pour prêter. Premier ministre là tenir portoué même terminal là qui gouvernement vient acheter l'argent pour prêter ici et qu'a moutué jeune homme vieux foy. Ça moi qu'a dit à Mr. Speaker, moi qu'a connecte li parce que c'est même portoué terminal là avec ces mêmes 200 millions de dollars qui a venu en Kaïsa la prêter. Ça c'est même bagaille là. Ça moi qu'a dit assez. Ça pas première fois premier ministre là a dit jeune homme vieux fort qui aura joué un travail. Là on te qu'a fait DSH Mr. Speaker. Premier ministre là te dit qui c'est jeune homme vieux fort là qu'a dit 400 cheval et que c'est jeune homme vieux fort qui a jeune travail. Même quand il a fait avec aéroport, il te dit c'est jeune homme vieux fort et tout le monde vieux fort qui a parlé pour est-ce qu'il a été dans le ghetto avec il a été a Pearl of the Caribbean. So what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is this. This thing about the airport and the $202 million, the Prime Minister once again is promising things in Glagla and there are no details, Mr. Speaker. And so, give me 3 years, Mr. Speaker. Give me 3 years. The airport, the Pearl of the Caribbean, only the Viewfort area. Give me 3 years. Et bien, on va jouer 3 years, Mr. Speaker. What I see here in this resolution is another attempt to bluff the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. It's another attempt to have a pool of funds where this government can procure direct awards, Mr. Speaker. It's another attempt to show once again the character of this Prime Minister, because time and time again, it is proven that this Prime Minister does not really care what you think. And he said it himself. He does not listen, he does not care. People are jackasses, so he comes to Parliament over and over again to try to prove that we are jackasses. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Viewfort North, please stand, sir. The last part of the statement, I would like you to withdraw it, that the Prime Minister comes to this House to prove that we are jackasses. I expect you to remove that statement off our record at this present time, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did not come to the House to say it, but he said it publicly, Mr. Speaker.
No. I want you to withdraw. No, remain standing. I want you to spell it out. I want you to withdraw your statement that you said that the Prime Minister comes to this House to prove that we are jackasses. I want you to remove that part, sir.
to prove that we are jackasses?
Withdraw your statements, please.
The Prime Minister did not come to this house to say we are jackasses, but I believe he comes here to
The
prove that we
honorable
are
member,
jackasses.
remain standing.
I withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable member, Castries South.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that you recognize in the spirit of Standing Orders 58.1 that there's a right to protect the minority in Parliament, and if parliamentarians want to speak on matters, the jostling and gamemanship is recognized for what it is, but the Standing Orders provides 58.1 for recognition of the rights of minority in the House to speak. Mr. Speaker, I rise and I want to say from the onset that, like my colleagues on this side, we are not opposed to the redevelopment of the Rwanda International Airport. We're not opposed to it. In fact, Mr. Speaker,
Spider and myself. Yeah.
okay. Mr. Speaker, we have a difficulty in the approach that is being used by this present government. And Mr. Speaker, you would recall that when we came to this House on December the 11th last year, seeking to provide a guarantee for the borrowing of $100 million US dollars for the financing of the redevelopment of Uranora International Airport, we expressed our thoughts and our objection to the approach used by this government. But Mr. Speaker, it was instructive, the presentation made by the member from Castries Southeast. It was very instructive. Because, Mr. Speaker, he presented to this House that it was a simple case of this House being asked to borrow $100 million that will be repaid in a few years' time. He went further to compare it with the approach taken by this side, where he claimed we'll be giving up $1.2 billion by giving up the tax, the taxes that would have been collected from departures. And he gave the impression to the people of St. Lucia that you are comparing $100 million to $1.2 billion. He never even said that it was $100 million US dollars, which equates to 270 million EC dollars. But the innocent St. Lucian listening to the debate then would have believed from his presentation that the airport would have costed $100 million. And more so, or even further, that all the monies that would be required would be $100 million. So if you read Hansard, you will see the constant comparison between $100 million and $1.2 billion, Mr. Speaker. And like I said, it was very easy for someone to that all we would need is $100 million to build the airport. We all knew that was not true, Mr. Speaker. We all knew that. And like I said, he did not even clarify that it was 270 million EC we were guaranteeing then. I remember, Mr. Speaker, standing up on a point of order and making the point that he was misleading the House and the nation. Because in a presentation from the member from Castries East, he had pointed out over the period of the lease of the airport to the concessionaire, we would be receiving monies, a percentage of the revenue. We would be receiving monies, Mr. Speaker, from other revenue generating activities at the airport. we would have to forego the cost of maintenance of the airport and management of the airport. And therefore, any fair comparison had to be between all those factors being included. But you would have gotten the impression it was a simple 100 million versus giving up 1.2 billion, Mr. Speaker. I remember, Mr. Speaker, clearly you ruling when I stood up and you said, words to the effect, Mr. Speaker, that he was probably just exaggerating, and sometimes we do that in the House. We exaggerate for the sake of emphasis, and it's true, Mr. Speaker. But there was a deeper thing. He was misleading the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember asking what are the terms and conditions of the loan, Mr. Speaker. And I was very passionate about it, Mr. Speaker. And I remember the member from Soufrière, Forces Jacques, saying, why don't I go and ask SLASPA what the terms and conditions are, since it's a SLASPA loan, Mr. Speaker.
This loan too.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm saying all of that to tell you how the people of St. Lucia have been misled on the approach taken by this government, Mr. Speaker. Have been misled. And Mr. Speaker, if you want, Mr. Speaker,
point of order.
On a point of
Member
order,
of the House is trying to not improper order, to basically mislead the House. Speaker. As he always does. Correct. Mr. Speaker, it was very clear that we came to this House and we borrowed
what's the point of
$150 million. As I see the repetition, of which $50 million was for the road redevelopment and $100 million was for the highway. And the member from Castries clearly had talked about that there was, the total cost project was going to be $107 million. But the most misleading part about the House is that we did not come to the House and give what the terms of the loan were going to be. Those were well spelled out here, Mr. Speaker. A 20-year loan, 5-year moratorium, LIBOR plus 1.5%. In fact, the member from Castries, he's talked about what LIBOR was and the fact that it was a variable rate. So all the details in terms of the terms of the loan were explicitly discussed and presented as required in order to be able to give the guarantee. So I would like the member to take that statement back. The fact is we did give that information in this House, and he knows that.
Honorable Member, Castries staff, sir. Honorable Member.
what it is that I'm to take back?
Honorable Member, I thought your presentation, you were setting up your foundation for your presentation. So I'm going to allow you to continue, but I will so monitor in light of what the Prime Minister has just said to me.
Mr. Speaker,
yes, sir.
I am,
The fact is,
Mr. Speaker,
He's still on the point of order.
the member from Castries South said just recently in this House that we did not provide, he asked for the details of the loan agreement and that somebody told him to go and get it from SLASPA. The purpose of coming to this
Yes, Mr. Yes, hello? Yes, Mr. Prime Minister, I recall his presentation on the last occasion, and yes, I did not intervene then, and you stood up on a point of order, and we went through that. The part right now of his presentation is pretty much going over his presentation and what transpired then. I am not going to, he has not to meet on this new debate made any statement other than reflecting on what transpired.
No, Mr. Speaker, I beg to differ. The member said that information was requested as to the details of the loan agreement, and he was told by members in this House to go and ask them.
Yes, that transpired on the last occasion. It isn't what he said that did in fact transpire on the last occasion.
That's not the manner in which he said it. He said that that's what it was. I stated as a fact.
No, yes. Continue, sir.
Prime Minister, I don't think you can even understand the point being made to you. I'm recalling what took place at the last...
Honorable Member,
but Mr.
Honorable
Speaker,
Member, I have moved on from that.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. So, Yeah. I leave you for CC, don't worry. Mr. Speaker, you see, the fundamental difference, Mr. Speaker, is the approach used by members on this side when they were in government, Mr. Speaker, and the approach being used by this government, Mr. Speaker. And this is the crux of the matter, Mr. Speaker. This is the crux of the matter. And Mr. Speaker, nobody can convince me that when we come into this house and you say that a loan is at this percentage and to be paid every 6 months, these are the totality of the terms and conditions of a loan. We all know better than that, Mr. Speaker. And even bankers in there will tell you that cannot be the totality, Mr. Speaker. But there is, Mr. Speaker, a fundamental question that St. Lucians want answered. Why is it you had an World Bank IFC managed approach to the financing of the redevelopment of the airport? One that would put no strain on the fiscal situation in the country, one that would put no strain on the debt to GDP ratio in this country. Why would that be cast aside? And even in casting it aside, Mr. Speaker, you have to repay the IFC the entire cost for the engagement over the period of time. Why is it that Jamaica is using that approach? Why is it that Barbados just signed an agreement to use that approach? Why is it that globally this is the champion approach to the financing of building airports and redevelopment of airports? Why are we putting all of that aside, Mr. Speaker, to use the approach of this government? That is the fundamental question that St. Lucians want answered. And the Prime Minister says, of course, there will be no pressure on the fiscal situation in the country, but he acknowledged last sitting, when we debated the guarantee, there will be some pressure on the debt to GDP ratio. And he says it again. And the question remains, why is it you're adopting an approach that will put pressure on debt to GDP, Mr. Speaker, at a time when everyone accepts we have so many problems in this country that needs financing? Why is it, Mr. Speaker? And I think when St. Lucians can get an acceptable explanation to this, Mr. Speaker, then some people might be more sympathetic. And Mr. Speaker, no amount of hiding the true comparison of the figures can excuse the government. Because even the average man who cannot understand all the technicalities of LIBOR and interest rates and all those things, Mr. Speaker, will ask the fundamental question, why are you abandoning this approach to the approach that you're using, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, you know what makes it even more difficult to accept by the common man, Mr. Speaker? Because there has been so much suspicion with the last time this government managed the airport redevelopment, Mr. Speaker. And we know, Mr. Speaker, and we've heard the Prime Minister, and he did announce when the documents were released in the US of the Ascenza inquiry and the Ascenza matter that's been heard in the US. And the Prime Minister said he will investigate if there's an investigation. That's almost 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker. And every time, Mr. Speaker, it happened in the last debate in December, the member for Castries Southeast spoke about Rochamel, Jufali, Grindberg, the same regurgitation, Mr. Speaker, that when you try to bring up a point, they repeat the same points, Mr. Speaker. We are still waiting. We are still waiting for the report on the Ascenza matter. The Prime Minister promises he would investigate. If there's an investigation, he would release a report, Mr. Speaker. Because that's the core of the issue. People are suspicious. Why are you giving up a project where there is no pressure on fiscal space? There's no pressure on debt to GDP. Why are you giving that up, Mr. Speaker, to go back a way that you had, which was tainted? And we are still waiting for the report, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, people are suspicious of this project. And they have reason to be suspicious, Mr. Speaker. And I want to go back, Mr. Speaker, because the member from Castries Southeast is very good at doing that. Jufali, Grindberg, Rochamel, Ainsworth. But yet, a talk show host, a former cabinet colleague of his, says openly in the public, when he can be sued for libel and defamation, that he was offered a bribe of $1 million. And no action, no denial, nothing has taken place. And you can understand why, Mr. Speaker, there are suspicions about this project, Mr. Speaker. You know, I accept you'll do any and everything you can to silence me.
Honorable Member Castries.
But you have to protect me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are suspicions about this project, Mr. Speaker. When the Padua letter is still circulating around, Mr. Speaker, you must expect St. Lucians and my constituents to ask questions about this, Mr. Speaker. And I ask, Mr. Speaker, are there other letters circulating? If a Prime Minister says that this letter was forged, but is not prepared to call Interpol, FBI, Europol, any agency, the same agencies they asked to investigate me, Mr. Speaker, to investigate whether or not, who is that ring, who is that involved behind forging signatures of the government of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker? Because I heard they have 3 agencies investigating me. In all the shops and things saying that. Mr. Speaker, you have to give me a little latitude to express
but I'm trying to keep you also on track.
Mr. Speaker. I'm very much on track, very focused, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Prime Minister, tell us, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell us about the Padua letter. I'm tired of hearing about Grindberg, Ruchamel, and all of them. Tell us, what is this country doing? And when we can state internationally the action we take in such matters, Mr. Speaker, then we can engender confidence in this process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know why this is such an important project? Because it's the largest infrastructural project in the history of St. Lucia, and there have been no tendering. Just let that sink in, Mr. Speaker. Let that sink in. The largest infrastructural project in the history of St. Lucia, and there have been no tendering for it. When we came into the House, Mr. Speaker, in December, we were told that a contractor has been chosen. So you've chosen a contractor for a project that you've not finished the drawings yet, you don't have a final costing for, but you already have a contractor, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine anyone in here building a house? They've not finished designing the house, they have no idea the costing of the house, but they've already chosen a contractor, Mr. Speaker. This is the largest infrastructural project in the history of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. We cannot accept as a people, as a nation, as a parliament, that there must be no tendering for that project, Mr. Speaker. And no amount of Grindberg or Rochamel can detract us from that fundamental question, Mr. Speaker. Why is it not being put out for tender, for international tender? And now you can start understanding why we move from the World Bank IFC managed process, because international best practices would apply, Mr. Speaker. International best practices would apply, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all borrowing has an effect. See this talk about, you know, there's no effect on the fiscal space and maybe some effect on debt to GDP ratio. All borrowing has an effect, Mr. Speaker. The fact that SLASPA is taking a loan of over $470-something million will impact on SLASPA itself taking more loans, Mr. Speaker. Because the first thing you're told, oh, that's not a central government loan, that's a SLASPA loan. SLASPA, statutory body, is taking a loan of over $470 million. And you said it will have no effect whatsoever on SLASPA. And the reason why is because we have a lockbox. Now, Mr. Speaker, I was given the impression that the lockbox was enough to cover the $100 million US loan. I was given that impression. I may have been wrong, because we were told it could be easily paid, Mr. Speaker, because we have the lockbox that's dedicated towards it, Mr. Speaker. But we've heard that the lockbox also covers the cruise ship terminal in Vieux-Fort. Monies from the same tax will be paid for that. We've heard monies from that tax would be repaying roads. And only recently we heard money from that lockbox, from that tax, would be paying for the regional security commitment we just made as a government, the government just made. And I have clippings, Mr. Speaker, of each
Speaker, again, the member from Castries South is attempting to mislead the House. No such statements were ever made. In fact, the $35 is part of the $98 and is separate. There's also a gas tax. Okay, so The fact is that the member is attempting to mislead this House in terms of what the real facts are.
That's deliberate.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member Castries South, you heard the Prime Minister, sir?
Mr. Speaker, you know, not Facebook, Mr. Speaker. I was going to look for the clips, Mr. Speaker. And Facebook. Mr. Speaker, you know, if I had the time, I would play the clips, Mr. Speaker. Find them and play them, but we'll come to that, Mr. Speaker. We'll come back to that. The House has a long day ahead of it, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that lockbox, monies from the tax, will be used for many purposes, Mr. Speaker. So I really want to understand how the same lockbox, the same taxes, Mr. Speaker, will be used to pay for everything. Not because the honorable member from Miku South stood up and said something, it should be automatically accepted. There's evidence to the contrary, and if he says so, and Mr. Speaker, I will go and listen to all the clips, and I am fully prepared to be respectful enough to come back and to say to the House that was not the case. And I trust that he is of equal magnanimity, Mr. Speaker. Let's go on, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I also need to ask, Mr. Speaker, that the member from Miku South can also tell us, according to the resolution before this House, this is a guarantee to the Bank of St. Lucia Limited. I was given the impression somewhere, we have been in one of the presentations, that a consortium of banks would be providing the balance of the monies needed. Now, I do not fully understand the niceties and the legalities of it, but how does it work that a consortium of banks, and the Prime Minister may wish to explain it, or the member from Castries South East may wish to explain it, Mr. Speaker? How does it work? How does a guarantee to the Bank of St. Lucia to provide a loan of over $200 million to SLASPA, how does that work out with a consortium of banks? And if there are no longer a consortium of banks involved, is it only BOSL providing the monies? If not, and is in fact a consortium of banks, what are the guarantees being given to those banks, Mr. Speaker? I would wish to know, I wish to understand, and I think, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and other line ministers responsible can explain to the people of St. Lucia, how does this guarantee work? Because the impression we had was a consortium of banks would be making the monies available. Yet the guarantee is in the name of the Bank of St. Lucia Limited. And like I said, Mr. Speaker, a minister can explain to the Parliament and the people of St. Lucia. There's an obligation to provide answers. Okay, so the member from Answer Castries is shouting that BOSL is the leading bank. So because you are the leading bank, the guarantee only goes to you? What does the leading bank mean? I don't know, and I'm asking. And St. Lucians have a right to ask those questions, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, maybe the member from Answer Castries knows about banking. He's probably served as a banker, you know, with Goldman Sachs or somewhere, Mr. Speaker, and he knows about those things, Mr. Speaker. You see? Of course, but you could never reach West.
Honorable Member, Castries South.
Mr. Speaker, I like it when he behaves like a nuisance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also need to ask a question before I conclude, Mr. Speaker. How many contracts have been awarded in the airport redevelopment project? Because, Mr. Speaker, elections is coming, and there's a mad scramble now to do things. 3 lost years, and there must be sod turning and ground turning and launch of this and launch of that, because there is the need. And you understand why, to show that things are happening and things have been done. Given that not one foreign direct investment project has come to St. Lucia, not one, except maybe Ojo Labs. But we all know we're paying for Ojo Labs. Not one hotel has started, not one new factory has opened, not one investment project in over 3 years. Everything that has been done is public sector driven. But that's not necessarily bad. Sometimes the public sector have to take the lead. But we will see a lot of things happening, Mr. Speaker. And very soon there will be the commencement of works at Uranura, Mr. Speaker. The process that had been used to award that contract, Mr. Speaker, will be an issue, Mr. Speaker. Will be an issue, Mr. Speaker. But more on that later, Mr. Speaker. Because the people of St. Lucia are suspicious of this project, suspicious of the approach used by the government of St. Lucia, and we'll be watching it closely, Mr. Speaker. We want an airport. We want an airport. But we do not want an airport, Mr. Speaker, that abuses our financial rules and procedures in this country. We do not want a project, Mr. Speaker, that denied having any parliamentary oversight, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in as much as I support the redevelopment of the Rwanda International Airport, I cannot support the approach used by this government, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member Viva South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I take my point of departure from an earlier statement made by the member for Castries South. And that pertains to the extraordinary nature of this loan. We are making history, Parliament is making history, or the Minister of Finance more appropriately is making history on two counts. The first count, Mr. Speaker, is this, that this is the first time that the government of St. Lucia is guaranteeing such a massive loan for an infrastructure project in St. Lucia. I cannot recall in the financial history of St. Lucia when the government has ever guaranteed stroke borrowed money to that amount. So that is history. The second, Mr. Speaker, is the Bank of St. Lucia. Again, I'm open to correction, and I will come back to that, Mr. Speaker, in a few minutes. I cannot ever recall the Bank of St. Lucia agreeing to make a loan of that amount to any government of St. Lucia until this loan. That is history. $202 million. Of course, the bank has borrowed significantly, has lent rather, Mr. Speaker, significantly in the past. But this is the first time, as far as I can recall, and I submit myself to historical correction, that the bank has lent the government that amount of money for a single project. Mr. Speaker, as a member for Castries South rightly noted, and I'm a little confused myself, the motion before us speaks to a loan from the Bank of St. Lucia. But in his presentation, the Minister of Finance indicated that it would be a syndicate of banks. Now, on the one hand, if it is a syndicate of banks, then of course it eases other concerns that one may have, that is to say, for the implications of the portfolio of the Bank of St. Lucia, which I shall come to. But the question remains. The question remains. Who comprise the consortium? Is it that we have a situation where the government of St. Lucia has entered into an agreement with the Bank of St. Lucia, and it is in that agreement that there is agreement by both parties that the bank will be the lead bank and there's a consortium? But the question still remains, Mr. Speaker. The Bank of St. Lucia is not a foreign bank. It's a local bank. Except to say that a percentage of shares is owned by Republic Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and when they do acquire the Bank of Nova Scotia, then the question will be, what do they do with the shares in the Bank of St. Lucia? Because for them to have shares in the Bank of St. Lucia while they're operating the Bank of Nova Scotia would clearly be incongruous and would yield a significant conflict of interest and conflict of competition. So the question, Mr. Speaker, is who are the members of this consortium? And it is usually the case that if you're going to go by way of a consortium, then you need to protect it legally by making mention of it in the motion before the House. That's what the issues about openness and transparency has been with matters of motions of that kind. And I don't have to go back into that history. But the Minister of Finance, in his statement, also gloats over the fact that this is all local. But we need to stick a pin, Mr. Speaker. In the last few sittings of the House, we have borrowed heavily from local banks. Now, what is the message that we are sending? Obviously, one would have thought that with a loan of $202 million, that this would be a perfect opportunity for external investors, whether within CARICOM or whether outside of CARICOM, would have jumped at the opportunity to invest. Why? Why? If your credit rating is so good, the regional securities market applaud you, pay you low interest rates, and I don't know whether the history bears that out from what the figures I'm seeing, but leave that for the time being. Then surely this is also an opportunity to finance it by bonds. Question is why? But we also know, Mr. Speaker, that the foreign banks in St. Lucia have made it quite clear that they will not invest anymore in government paper. They have said so, and government instruments. Unless, of course, there's a dramatic change in policy that we don't know nothing about. So why not them? Why not them, since they are part of the landscape? And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that since the Bank of St. Lucia is a public bank owned by shareholders, that the government has a duty to say who is part of the consortium. But, Mr. Speaker, this House seeks reassurances, and it's a matter I touched on in a previous engagement in this House. The state of health of the Bank of St. Lucia. Now, Mr. Speaker, I will say to you that politicians are always cautioned about statements they make about banks. I remember a former minister in the office of the Prime Minister, minister in the Ministry of Finance, made certain statements about the Bank of St. Lucia, and some individuals. Yes, I think the leader of the opposition is reminding me he had to retract the statement for him. But today, Mr. Speaker, if the Bank of St. Lucia is going to lend the government of St. Lucia $202 million, then very clearly in this Parliament, the health of the Bank of St. Lucia has to be an issue. It is not a debate that we can sidestep or ignore. Mr. Speaker, of all the members of this House here today, I guess I am the only one with direct memory of what occurred in St. Lucia in 2007, 2011, 2012. Of course, the member for Swazelle may be able to embellish that memory because of his then position at the Bank of St. Lucia. But, Mr. Speaker, that bank was on the verge of collapse. And of all the things any Prime Minister will handle in the course of his stewardship, there will be things that at best will stand out. Things perhaps that take you to the brink and you look down, see where you are going, you have to pull back and make decisions in the interest of the country. And there will always be moments, perhaps, when you might feel overwhelmed, you might feel frightened, you might feel uneasy, unsure of what the consequences will be. The Bank of St. Lucia was one of those episodes, Mr. Speaker, because what in fact had occurred was that one, the bank had to declare after an audit massive losses of several millions of dollars, among other things because of failed projects and also, Mr. Speaker, of investments that had gone bad. It was fair that once the information had become public, the bank may have collapsed. The IMF and the World Bank descended on St. Lucia because there were fears of the contagion that had started in Antigua, had gone to Anguilla, would have come down to St. Lucia and then spread across, of course, to St. Vincent to some extent. To the credit of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and the then Governor, Sir Dwight Venner, a plan was developed to deal with that situation to prevent panic from setting in. And again, the honorable member from Sozelle will know that part of that plan was that persons had to be sent down to all the branches of the Bank of St. Lucia to monitor account holders, to calm fears, calm anxieties. Calls had to be made to large depositors in St. Lucia to calm them and ask them to leave their deposits in the Bank of St. Lucia so that we could ride over that very difficult period. Now, Mr. Speaker, as a direct result of those massive losses and that near miss, the Bank of St. Lucia experienced losses for I think 6 to 7 years, until of course gradually those losses were narrowed. But it was a huge challenge to deal with the capital asset ratio of the bank and to deal with it and ease the bank out of the perilous situation that it found itself in. Now what do we have here? It's my understanding that earlier this year the bank issued dividends for the first time in 6 to 7 years. Again, I stand to be corrected whether it's 6 or 7 years. Perhaps it's a signal of return to some kind of health, although I'm fully aware that shareholders have been very uncomfortable because they have not been receiving their dividends. But what puzzles me is this rather generous interest both during the construction phase and in the post-construction phase. Oh, of course, you've been told that this is the government that are masters at negotiation. They know how, they have gifts of negotiation. They can make the impossible possible. And I don't know whether the member for Castries Southeast, I mean, I've never seen him break out in such robust laughter when I'm speaking. I mean, he is obviously enjoying himself by my mere mention of these words. Now, of course, a member for Babuno should have looked straight at me and try not to look to his right to be similarly tempted. Now, Mr. Speaker, the question is, what has changed? What has changed? If I am correct, that this is the largest loan ever conceded by the bank for a single project. And let us not forget that the government of St. Lucia holds directorships in that bank. Let's not forget. I believe that the Bank of St. Lucia owes it to the shareholders to issue a statement from the board of directors that they have assessed this loan, they have assessed the fundamentals of this loan, and they are satisfied beyond all reasonable doubt that it was a right and proper loan to grant. Mr. Speaker, when you see these banks go under, as happened in Antigua, Anguilla, and nearly happened here, it's always the government that has to handle the bailout. Always. And I recall the many nights that had been spent here working out, if perchance that bank had collapsed, how we would handle the payout if, as I said, it had collapsed. Thanks God it never happened. But given the history of the bank, I believe that the directors, the board of directors, must issue a statement indicating to its shareholders that the fundamentals of this loan are correct. Mr. Speaker, there's this matter of SLASPA, again, that was raised, and I think it was raised at the previous session of the House. I remember that I had raised it, and I noticed that the member for Castries South raised it again. This loan means that SLASPA is borrowing $472 million. And I'm not going to go into the arithmetic about whether $35 in the lockbox is going to pay both of these loans, the Taiwanese loan as well as that. I'm not going to do that. No, at least not for the time being. But what it does mean is that SLASPA can say goodbye to any other development project in this country. Because nobody's going to look at the SLASPA's balance sheet after that loan appears on its balance sheet. So whether we like it or not, we are condemned if you're going to do any work with any of these ports. They'll have to come from the private sector, and we'll see whether it's going to be PPPs. Because SLASPA will have no capacity at all to generate any loans to finance any development of any port in this country after that. That's a thing, that's a reality. And it is for those persons who are in the management of SLASPA to take the risks and for them to have wide open eyes as to the consequences of the decision that they're making. Mr. Speaker, I would not support this motion before the House. Not that it matters. It doesn't matter. Like everything else in this House that don't matter. Even when legislation is putrid and full of errors, and it is drawn to the attention of members of the House, they don't take the opportunity, the generosity on this side to clean up the legislation. And of course, I've been told, I'm not going to make it again recognition clean up legislation, leave it as it is, Mr. Speaker. So it is pointless to raise these issues. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the opposition plans to put in place a team to monitor this loan from start to finish. I compliment the leader of the opposition for this major step, and I believe that it is the right thing to do to put a multidisciplinary team to monitor this loan, including all the underlying arrangements from start to finish. Mr. Speaker, we all try to make our own history. Politicians love all kinds of legacies. Soon, the time will come when you have to talk about legacy. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker. Let me say this. Let us hope that this project is not a noose around the necks of St. Lucians. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, SLASPA is a very strange or different institution. It's the only statutory board that is under the management of two ministers, the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Infrastructure. At some point, it was the Minister for Communications and Works. SLASPA is extremely important. Mr. Speaker, SLASPA must never become a propaganda arm of the government. And I'm very worried, and it's the first time that's happened, that SLASPA is becoming a propaganda arm of the government. And the management of SLASPA must be wary of that situation. Mr. Speaker, I speak to a few press releases released by the government and by SLASPA. And if you're so minded, I can make it a document of the House. The press release of December 18th, 2018, and a press release of 12 December 2018 from the Office of the Prime Minister. And it says, airport redevelopment project ready to take off. Government delivers on promise to improve infrastructure. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, on the third paragraph it states, in order to ensure this project starts in the new year, the Minister for Finance on Tuesday brought a resolution before the House to guarantee a loan of $100 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China for the Iwanora International Airport Redevelopment Project on behalf of SLASPA. In that same release, Mr. Speaker, it says the government of St. Lucia, in the paragraph before the last, reintroduce the airport development charge of US $35 per departing passenger effective 2018, with these funds to be used by SLASPA to repay its loan for the redevelopment of HIA. Press release of the 12th of December. Press release of the 18th of December from SLASPA. I can make a document of the House. SLASPA welcomes the announcement of funding for the redevelopment of the Iwanora International Airport. And that is significant. It quotes the acting manager, and that's important. His tenure has not been established. He's the acting manager. He says, we welcome the announcement of the loan guarantee by the Minister of Finance towards the redevelopment of the Iwanora International Airport, Mr. Speaker. And it goes to say that he wants to acknowledge the continued support of the Honorable Stephenson King, Minister for Infrastructure. And they welcome the announcement of funding for the redevelopment of the Iwanora International Airport. Another press release from another body, and that body calls itself the Iwanora International Airport Project. Don't know which one is that. Can make it a document of the House. Iwanora International Airport Project. And it says HIA project ready to take off. And again, it quotes, Mr. Speaker. No, it's Iwanora International Airport project, February 24, 2019. I hope you can understand what I'm saying. Some of your colleagues can understand sometimes.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
I want you to understand.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition. You speak through the chair, so not directly to the Minister.
Mr. Chair, I hope the Minister for Infrastructure can understand what I'm saying. It's Iwanora International Airport Project. Can make it a document of the House, February 24th, 2019. Iwanora project ready to take off. I hope you can understand that. And it says, Mr. Speaker, in the paragraph there, it says, the Republic of China, Taiwan is financing the very important redevelopment project that will change how we dialogue with the rest of the world. It's my honor and pleasure to join in presiding over the HIA development project sponsored by Taiwan. We can anticipate in the future every aircraft that touches down and takes off from this airport will symbolize the diplomatic ties between the two countries. And we believe that the completion of this project is going to boost the economy of St. Lucia, says President of the Legislative Yan of the Republic of China, Honorable, I want to spell it, because I mightn't be able to pronounce it, SUJAI-CHYUAN. That is from the Huano International Airport project. It further says, the project will commence in weeks. The project will commence in weeks ahead with a projected timeline of 40 months. That was in February, Mr. Speaker, by something that called itself the February 24th, 2019 Huano International Airport project. Mr. Speaker, I just want to caution that SLASPA must not become the propaganda arm of the government. It should not become that. It was not intended to be the propaganda arm of the government. Mr. Speaker, let me state clearly, for those who can understand, that I have no issues with the redevelopment of the Huano International Airport. When we came into government, the former United Workers' Party government tried. They could not do it because the bank refused A&M, the people that they wanted to finance the project. So they started this project, they thought of it, they implemented the airport departure tax, the ADC, but the bank refused finance. So let me make it clear that the United Workers' Party government failed in the first attempt to develop Huano International Airport. They failed. But Mr. Speaker, what is significant is that this government comes to the Honorable House to borrow $200 million, and they glibly say $200 million, $200 million. You think if any member had his own business and he was going to the bank to borrow $200 million, he would come glibly and say $200 million, 200. And the bank is solid, and we can pay it. We can pay it on the $45 departure tax. Very glibly, $200 million. You have borrowed over $1 billion, but you come for another $200 million, and you very glibly, oh, that's not a problem. That's easy. That is high finance, finance of a guru. Jamaica, they have more visitors than St. Lucia, a lot more. They could just implement the tax, very easy. Oh, you'll make $900 million, and that's no maths. 45 multiplied by X amount of visitors, you get 900 million. Build an airport, you'll have extra. You'll have extra to do local FBI and roads and etc. Easy. And because these guys were so foolish, they could not do that. So they had to look for a PPP to do it. So simple. But Jamaica, that they model on, is going through a PPP. Barbados, that they say are the friends, is going through a PPP. But in St. Lucia, we're so bright. We have so many geniuses in the government that they can just do it. Very simple. And $35 per passenger, let's build the airports. But Mr. Speaker, this government is reckless. It is reckless because it sees the examples from other countries. The recent example is Barbados. And I'm coming to borrowing from local banks. Barbados, Mr. Speaker, is in a situation now where local banks are refusing to lend them any money. And what they've done now is they have to almost punish local people in terms of being able to make their returns or to make profit because of overcrowding, because of expenditure because of borrowing by government from the local banks. But this government, again, very glibly comes and says there's excess liquidity. At a time in our history, Barbados was the most progressive country in the region. Their economy was lauded as one of the best economies. And look at where Barbados is today. And the same, we're going down the exact same path. We are borrowing because our debt to GDP ratio is okay because of rebasing. We are borrowing, and we're doing exactly the same thing that these countries do. But we have so many geniuses that can say economic growth is 8% cumulatively. Never heard in the history of the science. 8% cumulative growth. Adding growth. Never happened before. Growth is per year, but let's forget it and let's move on. But Mr. Speaker, how much does that airport actually cost? What is the cost of the airport? How much does that airport cost? Secondly, who are the contractors? Who will be the subcontractors? How will the work in that airport be subdivided? Who will get the contracts? Will the contracts be tendered? Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, where is the Taiwanese loan? Has the Taiwanese loan been approved? Have you begun to draw down on the Taiwanese loan? Is the Taiwanese loan available to the public, to the SLASPA? Have you completed negotiations for the Taiwanese loan? These are the questions, Mr. Speaker. But you came here and you were boasting. You've guaranteed you have $100 million in Taiwan for airport and for roads. But now, soon after, and I expect next week for them to turn dirt on the airport and have a big story. Airport development is concerned, is commencing, projects are starting, this government is working, 3 years are over, let's go. We're doing St. Jude by December, we're opening OKU by November, and 6 hotels, the 6 hotels that were never built in the last 3 years, the 6 in Miku, never built, but all of them going to start this year. Government is working, we have growth, we're on our way. Next week, I bet you will see all sorts of stories about SLASPA. And the Taiwan, you still have not got the Taiwanese loan. But you come in here to borrow another $200 million and you say you have $100 million from Taiwan. So you need all the money one time. But I'll tell you something. This is recklessness at its highest, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bank of St. Lucia, and as the former Prime Minister says, I'm going to be very cautious about Bank of St. Lucia. Very cautious. Bank of St. Lucia, I want to congratulate them for making a profit this year. Bank of St. Lucia did make a profit this year. Mr. Speaker, the Bank of St. Lucia total loans is $849 million. $849 million is the total of all the loans from Bank of St. Lucia. Of course, they have fixed deposits of $1.8 billion at the last financial statements. That's true. But out of that $849 million, you are going to borrow $202 million. So in one swipe, you are borrowing 1/4 or nearly 25% of the entire portfolio of the bank. That's what you're going to borrow. But of the entire loan portfolio of the bank, you are borrowing 25% at one swipe. It is true, the bank may be able to take it now. What about if there's a hurricane? What about if there's a hurricane? The IMF have warned you to put some money aside for the hurricane. What about if there's a hurricane? What about if something happens and St. Lucia tourism doesn't do how they say it's doing? What will happen to the airport departure tax? Where will you get visitors to pay to sustain the airport development tax? But you very glibly say, $200 million, economy doing well. Where is the responsibility? Where is the foresight?
Where is they looking into the future if something goes well, if something goes bad for the country? You borrowing money that you do not have to borrow. But, Mr. Speaker, the Bank of St. Lucia's shareholdings, 36.77% is either government or quasi-government. 19.36% from government and 17.41% for NIC. And the preference shares in that bank, all of them are held by the NIC. So the exposure and the majority of the deposits at the Bank of St. Lucia belong to the NIC. So these cannot be taken in isolation. The bank did make a profit. The bank did reduce its non-performing loans portfolio. But you can't take it in isolation because this situation is not static, it's dynamic. And any planner will look at the what-if situations, what people call the sensitivity analysis. If that happens, what are the going to be results? Not grant charging for political mileage, grant charging and attacking people and performing all kinds of stints just for political mileage, Mr. Speaker. No, you look at the future, you look at what happened in Antigua. Look what happened to the Antigua Development Bank, Antigua Commercial Bank. Look what happened there because of excessive internal borrowing. Look what happened to the banks in Barbados, in St. Vincent, because of excessive borrowing. The former Prime Minister told you, look what nearly happened in St. Lucia. But you're not cautious. You go ahead just for political mileage, Mr. Speaker. Just for political mileage. Mr. Speaker, I came in this honorable house and I said that the IMF had been misled in that these airport loans, both for Taiwan and now for Bank of St. Lucia, would have to be guaranteed by this government. The response I got was, they have an income stream, as if the income stream is definite. As if the income stream doesn't fluctuate with what happens in the larger economy. I want to put on the record again, Mr. Speaker, because you see, history will have to absorb me. Because you know, what we're doing here, we pretending as if we are kings, and we can do whatever we want, and we're in government. But Mr. Speaker, all of us in this room, all of us, at some point, we're going to be out of here. And our children and our grandchildren are the ones who will have to deal with issues. Because all of us, no matter how powerful we think we are today, both in and out, we will have to live here at some day. And I'm going to read for you, Mr. Speaker, from the IMF report. And it can be made a document in the House. Because when I said to this honorable House, I was ridiculed, as if I didn't know what I was saying. Page 5. The IMF report for the year made a report of May 31st, 2018. Right? Here's what the IMF report says. And the IMF officials do not get information from the air. Here's what it said. It said, public debt will only increase by the amount of the road network loan. The airport loan will be contracted by SLASPO, a non-financial public corporation, and repaid within the proceeds of the airport development tax. So the IMF were told that there would be no guarantee because any contingent liability is part of the national debt. And this morning, we've come here to guarantee another $200 million after we had guaranteed another $100 million a few months ago. But that's what the IMF was told. So the national debt, Mr. Speaker, will contingently increase by $470 million, contrary to what the IMF was told. But we laugh about it glibly. $45, you get $45 per passenger. Y'all couldn't do it. Y'all were there, y'all didn't do it. $45, that's easy. Some calculations was worked. The government of St. Lucia will make $900 million, and we will give $900 million to a foreign company. That's what they said. Very easy. The government of Jamaica doesn't do that.
The government of Barbados doesn't do that. 200 airports are being built through the PPP mechanism. But you all have geniuses here. Geniuses. You all alone can do what's good. Mr. Speaker, we're going further, Mr. Speaker. So that means that apart from the over $1 billion they've borrowed, they've contingently made this future of St. Lucia, the young people of St. Lucia, contingently liable for another $500 million. And the member for Viewford South made an important point about Slasper, because you heard about a new Castries cargo terminal at Cul-de-sac costing $310 million. St. Lucia will have the most ports in the world, 2 in Viewfort, 1 in Castries, I had to put in 1 in Ancillary. The most ports in the world. I've never seen a country that will build so many ports, that will build so many ports in 1 year. All these ports, 2 in Viewfort. Viewfort will have 1,000 hotel rooms. My God, 1,000 hotel rooms. After you have, Mr. Speaker, let's move on. 1,000 hotel rooms in Viewfort, 2 ports, DSH, 400 horses, and Destiny. What's the name of the horse? Justify. Mr. Speaker, but we're going to have horse racing in December. We've abandoned that horse racing twice. We'll be banned it because they had cricket, although the horse racing was after cricket. But we banned the horse race because of cricket. Mr. Speaker, but that is management. It's coming December the 14th, horse racing. I'll look for a white hat. You know where? Where?
Honorable Ma'am.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister comes under a syndicate of banks. You think a Minister of Finance speaking in the, no, he said syndicate. He said syndicate use. I underlined what he said because in the year we used. Anyhow, that's another show. He said a syndicate of banks. He did not have, he could not say what syndicate, who is in the syndicate, Mr. Speaker. But that's the same Prime Minister who knows very well that the Bank of Nova Scotia is going to go to the Republic Bank. So that means it can't be the Bank of Nova Scotia. What other bank? FCIBC, not interested, they're looking to leave the region. So it can't be FCIBC. The only bank is First National. Now let us go and see what First National is doing. First National Bank made a profit this year. Well managed, doing well. A profit of, they paid dividends, Mr. Speaker. First National Bank, a local bank, their total assets is $764 million. They have $645 million worth of deposits, and their loans are $502 million, their total loan portfolio. So is it First National? You just borrowed heavily from First National. So who is in the syndicate? Who is in the syndicate of banks? Which banks? And if you're so certain, you have a plan that is airtight, you have such a good financial manager, you have $35 per passenger that will repay that loan, why didn't you set up an airport bond? Set up a bond, even though you don't set it up, you can let the Regional Securities Market set it up for you, and let the private sector, let the banks, let all of them invest in the airport bond, because you have an airtight model. You have a model that's airtight. You're going to make $900 million per year, and that's what we're giving foreigners for 40 years. You have, that's what you said, $900 million you'll collect.
A year.
I don't matter if you say $900 million. Don't try to mama guy people. Not inside this house. You said $900 million. You multiplied, simple maths. You say these guys are so stupid. And your surrogate said the same thing. I have it on the record. Your surrogate said the same. I have the date when your surrogate said it. We are so foolish. We're so foolish that we're going to give up $900 million and to give to foreigners. And we could do it here because you have an airtight model. If you have an airtight model, go to the market, stop overcrowding the banks, and set up a bond and collect it there. It's airtight. Why can't you do that? No, you're not doing it. You're going back to the banks. You know why? In the first place, you use diplomatic muscle. Use diplomatic muscle. Well, I want to be kind. Use diplomatic muscle in the first case. And the second case, in the second case, you know that the bank is doing better, but you have the majority shares indirectly. So you're going back there. And you know, what I'm saying, I want you to prove it with evidence. All the banks in the region have suffered from this problem. Antigua, St. Vincent, Barbados, Jamaica. You heard the fiasco with all these banks in Jamaica for a long time ago. You know that. But you're going to the same path for political expediency. You had a PPP arrangement. You know, in spite of what is said, that PPP arrangement, there was a concessionary agreement that had to be just finalized. You also know that two of the world's biggest airport developers had shown interest in that airport. You also know that that loan would not impinge directly on the national debt of St. Lucia. You also know that the risk of airport construction is a serious risk. Every airport that has been built has come up with risk. In Trinidad and Tobago, there are still people there waiting to go to jail because of the airport development. You know that. You also know that all airports to jail out of the United States because of that airport. That's a fact. You also know all airports have come into problems with cost overruns, but you're going right into it. You're going right into it, and you want to use. It's painful when I see simple $35 multiplied by arrivals. So that's it. Everybody should do that. And further, you also said that you go on May the 9th, 2019. You said that you're going to have a foreign FBI, a CARICOM FBI, that's what you said, a CARICOM Federal Bureau of Investigation. You said so on the 9th, at the 19th meeting of the CARICOM on regional security. And that is what you said. You said that you will pay it from utilizing part of our airport tax in our case. Utilizing part of our airport tax in our case.
Yes, $90.
Our airport tax in the case. So what you're saying, Mr. Speaker, when this government rejected the IFC proposal, the World Bank, the IFC offered, they said, okay, if you do not want us to do it for PPP, let us manage it for you, because that's our business. None of us here know anything about airport development. Because we win an election, we become engineers because we win an election. Now I won 5 times. So I should be everything. But because we win an election, even though we lose once, and we only win 1, I won 5 times. I win in 6 again, and if I won 7. If because you've won an election, you become an engineer, you become a doctor, you know about St. Jude's, you know about OAKU, you become a social scientist because you win an election. None of us here are experts in airport development. The IFC said that if you do not want us to go for a PPP, let us manage the project for you. Very simple. Why did you say no? Why are you saying no when the IFC made the proposal to you to manage the process for you? You are in government, you all win elections, you all can do whatever you all want. You all are kings and princes, no problem. So what you can do is at least forget the opposition. We've lost our right to speak. Forget the opposition. We lost our right to speak on June the 6th. Allow the IFC to manage it for you. If your intentions are clear and honorable, let the IFC manage the process for you. But you say no, you want to do it yourself. Now, you did it yourself, but you have not told us what are the procurement principles and the procurement policies on that airport. So all the flashing mirrors, all the attacks, all the you didn't do it too, you were there, they didn't have all these stories answer the question, what are the procurement policies as they relate to the contractors who work in this airport? Further, Mr. Speaker, this government is taking money from local sources, $202 million for a project that will be very much capital intensive. It's going to be very capital, because a lot of airport, and that's what makes experience in airport procurement so important. Because when you have a major firm building the airport for you, they can use their economies of scale. They can use their economies of scale. They can leverage better prices because of their size. And that's why it's important, the airport development, you have people who have experience to do it for you. So that $202 million, a lot of it will go out of the country. And further, you are in a paper to come to Parliament in a while, you are excluded from VAT. I don't need your advice. You are excluding it from VAT. You are excluding the airport goods and services from VAT. So you're going to take $200 million. Most of it will go out of the country because the airport is capital intensive, and now you're going to exclude it from VAT. That is the government's, that's the government of implementation, the government that can do things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, look at the pressure. That is a fact. You are going to waive VAT. That's all I said. That's a fact. Of course you're going to say what?
Leader of the opposition.
You are going to waive VAT.
Leader of the opposition. Remain on.
You're going to waive VAT. That's for you to find out. That's for you to know, not me. You are the boss. You are the
leader of the opposition.
Not me. Mr. Speaker, this government, this government is so reckless. They're so reckless in their financial dealings that they boast. It's the first government I see boasting about borrowing money. There is no government that boasts about borrowing money like this government. They boast about it. They boast. They've just borrowed nearly $500 million. Now they're boasting about another 200 million. They're boasting. Insensitive to what debt has done to these economies of the region. So this government, all the economic growth is growth by borrowing. That's what it is, growth by borrowing. Because none of the 6 hotels have been built. The 6 promised in Miku, and now the 6 promised in every budget speech. None of them have been built. So it is growth by borrowing. But this government, elections are coming. And I came here and I said to them, when they were laughing at me, they were in their glories. They were laughing, giving me all kind of mépris. I said to them, 4 years is not 40 years. I told them that the time will come when they have to account to the people of St. Lucia. Because they believed when they won the election, they would be in government forever. Now, we're on the 4th year. I want to ask this government, I saw a list of projects. The only project this government has done of any significance is 2 bridges by the Ministry of Infrastructure. 2 bridges. Exactly. 2 bridges. The Choiseul Secondary School, which they completed. And it was necessary. We knew it was necessary. From 2015, the plans for the Choiseul School were in order, were approved. The consultants had been approved. In May 2016, don't interfere in that. In May 2016, the tenders board approved a contractor for the Choiseul Secondary School in May 2016. Elections came in June the 6th, 2016. This government sat on the tenders board recommendation for nearly a year. For nearly a year. And started the school after, and the school got completed. And I'm very happy for the minister, because he's not a politician, but these days he turned politician. I'm very happy for him, because he shows that people needed that school. But that's the only capital project. The Denby school that they boast about, we finished that, we started that, they barely finished it. What is the capital projects that this government has implemented, serious capital projects that this government has implemented, except 2 bridges and some repairs to some roads? What is the government's major capital project for this government to boast about? But economic growth in the year after he won the election, they say it was 3.6%. Now, they were in power from June to December, but in the short term, there's so much good managers. They had years of implementation, years of this and that. There was economic growth. The next year, they came and they said it was 1.6%. The bank said, no, it was 0.6%. They're here. I want to tell all the government's projects are full of will do, and you all didn't do it already. You all didn't do it. That's the government excuse. Where are the government's capital projects in the last 2 years? Where are they? Where is the government's private sector investment projects? Major private investment projects, except Ojo Labs. And that is private sector driven by our money into Ojo Labs. Where is the government's major private sector development projects in the last 3 years? But now, as I warned them, the 4 years is coming. So you hear, you'll never see a government open so many projects in 1 year. Next week, they're going to go at Ivanhoe Airport. The deal is to pass a tractor in there and probably give 2-3 people work and say, work has started. For us, we'll have had hats and all kinds of things on them. Work has started. This government is working. That's what's going to happen at Ivanhoe Airport. I'll tell you something further, that this government is going to disclose so many plans. They had a big ceremony because they said they put in CCTV in Castries. The same government that had CCTV and the cameras were not working. The same government. But this time, they have a big program for CCTV. The same government that neglected or refused the loan for the CDB that would reduce our carbon imprint because they would change the use of the sodium-filled lights we have here and change it to LED lights. This same government rejected the president's recommendation for a loan. The president said this loan has a payback period of 5 or 6 years. Here is the money. The government of Suriname took it when we refused it, but looking for money from Pajora to build it, to do the same project that the government of St. Lucia rejected, the same loan they rejected. And I put it on the record. I want any of them to stand up here and tell me, any of them to stand up and tell me that the Caribbean Development Bank did not approve a loan for the St. Lucia government for the procurement to be done by Lucia to change all the lights in St. Lucia into LED lights. So there was no need to have any letter to whom it may concern to Pajora, because the loan had been approved. So, Mr. Speaker, back to loan borrowing from this government. If this government had any sense of fiscal prudence, they would have done the PPP arrangements like their friends in Jamaica did, like their friends in Barbados did, like all other countries are doing when it comes. Do you know, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, do you know that that Heathrow International Airport is not even owned by the government? Could be Heathrow, could be Gatwick. Not even owned. The government doesn't even own it, you know. They don't even own the airport. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that as we speak, there are about 200 airports in the world that are being built now for a PPP arrangement? But the geniuses in St. Lucia, a country of geniuses, will say, we'll abandon that and we're going to do it our way. But Mr. Speaker, I want to warn that this government must be prudent in their borrowing. Government is not a business. Government must not be run as a business. And if government was a business, businessmen, prudent businessmen, would not borrow like that. I warn them, hold on to the borrowing. Go to the electorate and speak the truth. Don't mama guide them with projects. Because there are a number of projects that this government is promising, you know. They're promising a new Castries cargo terminal, sports infrastructure, a new terminal in George Charles Airport, Castries Grosley Highway upgrade. They're promising road improvement and maintenance. They're promising Millennium Highway and West Coast Road rehabilitation. They're promising a north-south link. They're promising a north-south link from northeast, from Babonneau to Shock, and a north-side link that will go through, that will have tunnels. They're promising a St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project, a new extension. They're promising a Castries market redevelopment. They're promising village tourism redevelopment. They're promising police headquarters and courts. They're promising DSH, the DSH Bypass Road, they did already by direct award. They're relocating the Bossejou farm. They bought the land for $16 million. I want everybody, Mr. Speaker, I want to start with you. I want you, Mr. Speaker. You are a lawyer by profession. I want you to go to the registry and look at the land sales in the area where this government acquired the land and tell me what is the price of land, what's the cost, at what cost has land been sold in that area. And I want you to compare it to the money they paid the person. By the way, the money they paid, what? Man, listen, you can understand me, you know. Can you understand me? You can understand me.
Honorable member.
I want to go through that again. I want you, Mr. Speaker, to go to find out or get a valuation, because you have the government has a valuation unit, and find out the price or the cost the price of land that was sold in the area where they purchased from Vantim. How much they paid for that land, and check the cost of land, how much was the price of land being sold in that area. I want you to do that homework yourself, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, they're talking about relocation of Bossejou farm, relocation of meat processing facility from their friends in Taiwan. They want to relocate it because right now they abandoned it for horses. Then they're talking about the LED street lighting retrofit project. All of that because elections are coming. And anytime you corner this government, you did it too, you only go down that road. The people of St. Lucia did not want to go down that road. That's why we lost the election. They didn't elect you to go down that road. They elected you to stop going down the road you were going. So by your only defense being, you did it already. Now you know. The people of St. Lucia rejected us, and we accepted it. But they put you in government for you not to go down that road. So this flashing mirrors and this thing you're talking about, you all did it too. That is a non-argument. The people of St. Lucia have decided that they do not want to go on the road we are going. So you are the one who must change it. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by telling you that this government is insensitive to the future of this country. Because this government has all the examples of what high debt can do a country. All the examples. The late Sir Dwight Venner was on his knees about debt. The president of the bank now, on his knees about debt. The IMF have advised you to look at your debt trajectory. They have advised you, but you just borrowing, really just borrowing, and making excuses. Debt to GDP ratio is 63%. It's gone down by 3% when it came to power. You just go ahead, you just borrowing money. Stop it. Forget about the politics. That's not about us, not about me. You can attack me, you can malign me, you can do whatever you want. It's about the future of St. Lucia, not about me. We only have for time. You can malign any of us around here. You can do it, but think about the future of the country. Stop looking at short-term political gain. Stop it, because you're going down the track. You're going down the same track that all these countries went down to, that led them to the IMF, that led them to the contagion that's happening in the banks in Barbados, that led them to the Antigua Commercial Bank having to completely restructure, that led them to what happened in the St. Vincent Commercial Bank. You led them down that same track. And you're going because you believe you want to win an election, and you believe that you can succeed in wiping the legacy of the Labour Party from the history books of St. Lucia. You will not succeed, and I'm warning you, not for our sake, for the sake of the young people of St. Lucia, to look at that debt that you are accumulating. Look at it. Because even though now you have $45, you do not know what will happen. You have no idea what will happen. You can't look into the future. So I'm saying, not for our sake, because your goal is to eliminate us, not for our sake, but for the sake of the young people of St. Lucia, look at this debt that you're accruing on the backs of the people of St. Lucia. I thank you.
Honorable Prime Minister, can we take a break now?
Speaker, I beg we suspend the House for lunch for 1 hour until 3:15.
Honorable members, the question is that the House stands suspended until 3:15. I now put the question, as many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. House is suspended until 3:15.
Well, we've come to the end of this morning's session of the House of Assembly. The House will reconvene at about an hour from now. What we can perhaps do now is to look back at the MPs who made their contribution this morning. The morning started with the MP for Barbano, the Honorable Ezekiel Joseph. Then the MP for Mikud North, the Honorable Prime Minister Alan Chasney, followed by the MP for Labrie, the Honorable Alva Baptist. Then we had the MP for Vieux North, Moses Jabatis. Then the MP for Castries South, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, and followed by the MP for Vieux South, the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, and lastly, the Honorable Philip J.P., MP for Castries East. And so we invite you to join us in the next hour when we will reconvene here in the House of Assembly. NTN will bring you live coverage. Thank you for viewing.